Chapter 213. Mo Chinga had her own considerations as to why she told them the secret of her purine constitution. First, Bichuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators. Among the 6 people in the pagoda, only Tang Xin was a man. Judging from Tang Xin's words and actions, he really couldn't handle such a big responsibility. If it was Elder Qingxi, she might be considerate of Tang Xin, but Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao had no reason to force her. Second, the 6 of them were trapped in the Dao Achieving Pagoda and were now in the same boat, so Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao didn't have any reason to harm her. Third, although cultivators in the cultivation world were self-interested, cultivators in cultivation groups were very respectful to their sect founders. For Mo Yaoqing's sake, they wouldn't do anything to her. Finally and most importantly, Mo Chinga herself only obtained a part of Mo Yaoqing's art of Sunu and didn't obtain any other secret techniques. If Bichuan Court was a cultivation group established by Mo Yaoqing, it was very likely that Mo Yaoqing passed away here and her secret techniques were also left here. Mo Chinga already guessed the reason Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao called her and Tang Xin here was because they needed help. Knowing she was the descendant of the sect founder and that she had a special constitution, it was very likely that they'd pass some of the founder's secret techniques to her. With powerful enemies outside, she really needed to strengthen herself. She was right. After learning she was Mo Yaoqing's descendant and confirming she also had a purine constitution, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao gave her a jade slip that supposedly recorded some of Mo Yaoqing's unique secret techniques. Elder Qingyi sighed and said, "Unfortunately, you're not a disciple of Bichuan Court." Otherwise, Mo Chinga just smiled and didn't answer. It was impossible for her to stay in Bichuan Court. Even if Bichuan Court's founder was Mo family's ancestor, she couldn't leave Xianqing School just to revive Bichuan Court. She had no interest in being in charge of a cultivation group at all. Her goal was to achieve Dao and become an immortal. However, Bichuan Court had such a relationship with her, so if she made some achievements in the future, it wouldn't be a problem for her to take care of it. In the following time, aside from healing, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao taught Tang Xin some spells and gave her pointers on how to heal. As it turned out, Dead Aura was only afraid of fire, so they could only slowly use their Dantian real fire to devour and dissolve it. However, the Dantian real fire of a foundation-building cultivator was still very weak, and Ren Yufeng's Dead Aura was also very powerful. It would take Mo Chinga at least more than 10 years to completely dissolve this Dead Aura. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao's injuries were even worse, so they couldn't help her at all. Mo Chinga, on the other hand, wasn't worried at all. She had a temperament that could endure loneliness and she was still young, so she could afford to wait. Seeing that she was so calm, Qingyi and Qingyao admired her even more. Nevertheless, Mo Chinga already had a cultivation group, so it was impossible for her to leave Xianqing School and join Bichuan Court. However, Mo Chinga always felt that the gazes the 2 elders and Tang Xin gave her after learning her secret were very strange. Putting aside the 2 elders, Tang Xin's gaze always made her feel a little ambiguous. Could it be that Tang Xin had some thoughts about her? This was not impossible. His great-grandmother, who loved him dearly, had been brutally dismembered, and there was no news of his other relatives. If he wanted revenge, it was possible that she was his target. However, with his weak personality, Mo Chinga didn't take him seriously at all. Before she could ask this question, the 2 elders went to look for her first. "Seniors," Mo Chinga called out once she stepped onto the 4th floor. Now, the 3rd floor was the place where the 4 juniors recuperated and cultivated. The 2 elders needed peace and quiet, so they recuperated on the 4th floor. Upon seeing her coming up, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao both smiled. "Chinga, quickly come and sit." After learning about her past, the 2 of them treated her a lot closer and now called her by her name. Mo Chinga lowered her head and returned their greeting. She then picked up a small chair across from the 2 elders and sat down. "How are your injuries these days?" Elder Qingyi asked first. Mo Chinga answered calmly, "They're still the same. This Dead Aura is really powerful, so I can only slowly refine it now." The 2 elders naturally understood this situation, but they just wanted to find a topic to talk about. The 2 of them glanced at each other, but Elder Qingyi still spoke. "There's one thing we've been thinking about for a long time, but we still think we should tell you," Elder Qingyi said slowly. "To be honest, before you confessed about your past, we also didn't expect there would be such a coincidence." Upon seeing the 2 elders' cautious expressions, Mo Chinga's expression also became solemn. "Seniors, please speak frankly. Is there something wrong with it?" "No." Elder Qingyao sighed with emotion. "On the contrary, it's very good." Mo Chinga wrinkled her brows in confusion. Elder Qingyi smiled. Forget it, I'll be frank with you. Presumably, you've also noticed that we weren't only surprised to learn you have a pure Yin constitution. In fact, the reason is very simple. Although we've never seen a pure Yin constitution, we've seen a pure Yang constitution. Emo Chenga was startled. She immediately recalled Tang Xin's words and actions in the past few days, and her expression darkened. Upon seeing her expression, Elder Qingmiao smiled and said, "It seems you've already guessed it. Yes, the most important reason why Shen is so doted on by junior martial sister Qingxi and the female disciples in the group are all jealous of him."
I see.
Even if Bishuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators and even if there weren't many high-level male cultivators in Linhai, it didn't make sense for a male cultivator with a weak temperament like Tang Xin to be so popular. So this was the real reason. Emo Chinga calmed herself down and said faintly, "In that case, what do the two seniors think about this matter?" A pure Yang constitution was naturally the best dual cultivation partner for a pure Yin constitution, but these two constitutions were hard to find even in 1,000 years. Take Yuan Bao and Mo Yaoqing for example. One had a pure Yang constitution and the other had a pure Yin constitution. Although they were cultivators from the same generation, there was actually a gap of several hundred years between them and they were very far apart. If the two of them hadn't coincidentally met Zhong Muling, they probably wouldn't have met each other in their lives. However, although pure Yang and pure Yin constitutions were a match made in heaven, Yuan Bao and Mo Yaoqing didn't have a good impression of each other, and they never planned to perform dual cultivation together. Mo Chenga never thought she'd meet a male cultivator with a pure Yang constitution who lived in the same generation as her. Moreover, he was about the same age as her and his cultivation level was also quite close. Nevertheless, she once imagined that if she were Mo Yaoqing, would she perform dual cultivation with Yuan Bao? As soon as this thought emerged, she immediately extinguished it. Yes, the path to immortality was difficult, but the path of cultivation relied on one's own efforts. Relying on dual cultivation ultimately went against the original intention of cultivation. Besides, she also disdained handing over her body for this reason. As she stared at Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao, Mo Chenga made up her mind. If they made this request, she absolutely wouldn't agree. She wasn't afraid of them forcing her. How could this kind of thing be forced by outsiders? Besides, they had no one to use now, so they most likely wouldn't choose to have a falling out with her. As if she could see through her thoughts, Elder Qingyi smiled and said, "Tienga, with your current cultivation level, even if you don't perform dual cultivation, presumably forming your gold core won't be a problem. However, dual cultivation also has a lot of benefits, so you can think about it carefully." Upon hearing that Elder Qingyi didn't seem to have any intention of forcing her, Mo Chenga secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although she'd already made up her mind, she still didn't want to have a conflict with the two elders in the current situation. It was best if they didn't have any intention of forcing her. "Seniors, please don't mention this matter again. I once heard that great-grandmother also met a male cultivator with a pure Yang constitution, but she never had any intention of performing dual cultivation with him. Presumably, great-grandmother was a proud person and disdained using this kind of method to seek immortality. Although my cultivation level isn't as good as great-grandmother's, our hearts are the same." Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were silent upon hearing this. Selfishly speaking, they naturally hoped Mo Chenga could perform dual cultivation with Tang Shen. That way, even if Mo Chenga still had to return to Xianqing school in the end, it would still give Bishuan Court hope. Moreover, dual cultivation with pure Yin and pure Yang constitutions. Needless to say, their cultivation levels would advance very quickly. However, they all knew what kind of person Tang Xin was. His cultivation level was ordinary and he had a weak personality. If it was any other female cultivator in the school, they might have liked his face. Mo Chenga, on the other hand, came from Kunwu, so he couldn't arouse her interest at all. Most importantly, they proposed dual cultivation for Mo Chenga's sake. With Tang Xin's character, he was doomed to have no great achievements. If Mo Chenga herself objected, it would be meaningless. Thinking up to this point, Elder Qingyi heaved a long sigh and said, "You have your own ideas, so we can't do anything about it. That being the case, you don't need to worry, Shin won't do anything out of line." Mo Chenga wasn't worried about this at all. Even if Tang Xin had any ideas, she wouldn't be afraid. "In addition, there's one more thing we want to discuss with you," Elder Qingyi said after some deliberation. As long as they didn't force her to perform dual cultivation, Mo Chenga didn't mind doing something for Bishuan Court. "Senior, please speak frankly. If it's something I can do, I'll certainly do my best." Elder Qingyi smiled. "Since you have this kind of relationship with our school, we originally hoped you could stay in Bishuan Court. However, your Tao heart is firm and you're unwilling to be troubled by secular matters, so we can't force you. However, you also know Bichuan Court's current situation. Even if most of these disciples manage to escape, we'll still have to spend a lot of energy to rebuild Bichuan Court after we kill that devil cultivator. Junior Marshal Sister Qingmiao and I already thought of a way to deal with that devil cultivator, but the task of rebuilding the group will fall to the younger generation. Haolan's injuries are heavy, and even if she recovers, her cultivation level will most likely drop to the aura refining realm. Xia Qing and Shen aren't ordinary people. Therefore, we hope you can agree to be our Bichuan Court's guest elder. Mo Chinga raised her brows slightly then asked, Seniors, do you want to sacrifice your lives to kill Ren Yufeng? She was so keenly aware of the meaning behind their words that the two elders could only smile wryly. Elder Qingyao said, Correct. Senior Marshal Sister Qingyi and I suffered serious injuries, so our lifespans are affected. We can live for 30 to 50 years at most. Among the 6 people in the pagoda, Haolan's injuries are too heavy, so it'll be very difficult for her to have any great achievements in the future. Xia Qing and Shen aren't too enthusiastic about cultivation, so if the two of us fall, Bichuan Court really won't have any hope. If that's the case, we might as well stake our lives. If we can kill that devil cultivator with Haolan's ability to manage things, rebuilding Bichuan Court won't be a problem. At this point, the two elders both looked at her. Therefore, Qinga, we hope you can become Bichuan Court's guest elder to intimidate those who don't obey us. It was snowing, so it was freezing. Chapter 214. Mo Chinga lowered her gaze as if she was thinking. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao didn't say anything and just stared at her. After a long time, Mo Chinga finally said, Reasonably speaking, I should repay the secret technique the two elders gave Junior's great-grandmother. However, with Junior's current cultivation level, I don't think I'm qualified to be a guest elder. Since she didn't sound like she was going to refuse, Elder Qingyi smiled and said, We two old women won't live for long. When the time comes, there won't be any core formation cultivators in the group, so there's nothing wrong with making you an elder. Besides, with your current cultivation level and talent, it probably won't be difficult for you to form your gold core. At this point, she paused for a moment then sighed. Qinga, the 3 of them aren't enough to rebuild Bichuan Court. I hope you can lend us a hand for the sake of the founder. Such a sincere request actually made it hard for Mo Qinga to refuse. She thought for a moment then asked, If Junior is willing to be a guest elder, how long will I stay in Linhai? Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao smiled. Elder Qingmiao said, Not too long. You're a guest elder. As long as Haolan calls the disciples back and establishes her prestige, you can use closed-door meditation as an excuse to return to Kunwu. But I'm a Xianqing school disciple. Is it too bad for me to become a guest elder of another cultivation group? Elder Qingyi said, You don't have to worry about this. There are also disciples from big cultivation groups who become guest elders of other cultivation groups as long as there's no conflict between the two cultivation groups. Bichuan Court is in Linhai and has no intention of going to Kunwu, so it naturally won't affect you. If you're still worried, you can go back to the group and report to your master. Upon hearing how relaxed Elder Qingyi was, Mo Chinga thought for a moment then slowly nodded. If that's the case, Junior doesn't mind doing my part for Bichuan Court. It can also be considered as repaying seniors for giving me the book. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao finally felt relieved after receiving her approval. They smiled and said, Good, good. From now on we're on the same side. As they spoke, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao personally led Mo Chinga down to the 3rd floor and announced to the other 3 that they were inviting Mo Chinga to become a guest elder of Bichuan Court. This news was still quite shocking. Xia Qing couldn't snap back to reality for a moment. Wei Haolan and Tang Xin, who had just regained consciousness, had complicated expressions on their faces. Mo Chinga faced them all with a smile. The so-called guest elders had the title of an elder, but they only took offerings and did not interfere with the affairs of the sect. They all knew Mo Chinga was a disciple of Xianqing school, so there was no reason for her to stay at Bichuan Court. There was no conflict between them and Mo Chinga, so they were only shocked for a moment before they quickly regained their composure. They congratulated her and greeted her again. After they finished greeting each other, Qingyi and Qingmiao returned to the 4th floor to recuperate while Mo Chinga stayed on the 3rd floor. Fellow Taoist Yi. Wei Haolan's condition was still very heavy, but she was finally awake now. She greeted Mo Chinga with a smile. From now on we're fellow disciples. Mo Chinga smiled faintly. Wei Haolan naturally understood the two elders' intentions. Even if her cultivation level was preserved, it would be very difficult for her to make a realm breakthrough in this lifetime, so the elders wanted Mo Chenga to be her backer. Sect headway doesn't need to be so polite. In the future, Bichuan Court will still have to rely on you. There's not much I can do. Wei Haolan smiled. You and I both know what the truth is. Fellow Taoist Yi, in short, I'm counting on you. Wei Haolan was a smart person. It was very comfortable to deal with such a smart person because she knew how to control the situation well. Therefore, after killing Ren Yufeng with Wei Haolan around, it shouldn't be too difficult for her to become Bichuan Court's guest elder. After a brief conversation with Wei Haolan, Tang Xin cautiously glanced at her several times. Eventually, he summoned his courage and said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Yi, can we talk? Mo Chenga was a bit surprised. She never expected Tang Xin would take the initiative to talk to her. After thinking about it for a while, she readily agreed. Okay. Tang Xin looked at the transporting formation. Shall we go there? Mo Chenga nodded. Presumably, the things she wanted to talk to Tang Xin weren't suitable for Wei Haolan and Xia Qing to know. Once they reached the second floor, Mo Chenga stopped. Fellow Taoist Tang, if you have something to say, just say it. Tang Xin lowered his head and was silent for a while before he finally said, Fellow Taoist, you must already know I have a pure yang constitution. Yes. Tang Xin seemed to be afraid to look at her. He tilted his head and said, Then, fellow Taoist Yi, what do you think? Mo Chenga knew what answer he wanted to hear, so she just smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Tang, you might as well tell me what you think. Tang Xin was silent for a long time before he finally said, My great-grandmother was killed by that devil cultivator. My relatives are all outside and I don't know how they're doing. I want to cultivate well, kill that devil, and avenge my great-grandmother. He looked very serious when he said that, and he finally had a little bit of a man's decisiveness. Nevertheless, Mo Chenga's tone was still flat. So. Tang Xin looked up and said with unprecedented firmness, Fellow Taoist Yi, can you perform dual cultivation with me? She knew he wanted to mention this matter, but she still didn't expect Tang Xin, who was as weak as a woman, would directly say it. Mo Chenga paused. Seeing his pleading expression, she shook her head and said, I'm sorry, fellow Taoist Tang, but I can't agree to perform dual cultivation with you. Even though Tang Xin had long seen that Mo Chenga didn't have any feelings for him, he still didn't expect her to refuse him so decisively. He was stunned for a moment before he said anxiously, Why? Fellow Taoist Yi, I have a pure yang constitution and you have a pure yin constitution. Being able to meet each other is like a heaven-sent companion. Why would you refuse? Mo Chenga smiled faintly. Fellow Taoist Tang, why haven't you been willing to perform dual cultivation with your fellow martial sisters all these years? Tang Xin was stunned. He said in a low voice, I don't like them, so, then I'm the same. Mo Chenga's tone was flat. You also have no feelings for me because I have a pure yin constitution. But if we don't love each other and become dual cultivation partners, what's the difference between us and the past? Tang Xin looked up at her but didn't say anything. Mo Chenga stared at this young Master Tang who had never suffered before and said, I won't perform dual cultivation for this kind of reason. I want to walk on the path of becoming an immortal step by step. Her tone was so firm that disappointment flashed across Tang Xin's eyes, but he didn't want to give up. Fellow Taoist Yi, if you perform dual cultivation with me, your cultivation level will advance faster. Mo Chenga showed a faint smile. Fellow Taoist Tang, in the end you're not a woman. Perhaps all cultivators put their own interests first, but for women, staying with someone they don't love is indeed a kind of torture. Of course, it's not that fellow Taoist Tang isn't good. Mo Chenga still had a faint smile on her face even though she saw his devastated expression. Her eyes flickered. But matters of the heart are like this. I'm a cultivator, but I'm also a woman. Maybe some women can give up their original perseverance for the sake of cultivation, but that doesn't include me. I have my pride, so there are some things I'll stick to until the end. Tang Xin stammered, unable to say anything. Mo Chenga smiled. Fellow Taoist Tang, aren't you the same? Don't be blinded by your ancestors' death. Dual cultivation is, after all, a side path to the great Tao of cultivation. If your goal is also to achieve the great Tao, it'd be better to stick to your original heart and calmly guard it. That way you'll definitely gain more. It was so cold that her hands were stiff. She temporarily finished writing today's 5,000 words. Chapter 215. Sure enough, after Mo Chenga dismissed him, Tang Xin no longer looked for her. His gaze when he looked at her was no different from before. Obviously he'd let go of this thought. On the contrary, he cultivated a lot more diligently. Every time he encountered a problem, he would take advantage of the two elders' free time to ask for advice or ask Mo Tienga. In this current situation, Tang Xin was a help, so Mo Tienga didn't hide anything and told him everything she knew. As a result, Tang Xin's cultivation level rose very quickly. After all, he had a pure yang constitution, so his spiritual roots shouldn't be as bad as hers back then. As for other matters, the two core formation elders already had their own plans. Mo Tienga was only a guest elder in name, so she couldn't manage them and it wasn't convenient for her to talk about them. Besides, she didn't have a better way. Ren Yufeng's strength was too terrifying. She couldn't enter the virtual sky world for the time being, so she couldn't concoct medicinal pills. It was already troublesome enough to refine the dead aura on her body, so it was impossible for her to make a realm breakthrough. Since she couldn't make a realm breakthrough, she couldn't deal with Ren Yufeng, so this matter could only be decided by Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao. On the 7th floor of the Dao Achieving Pagoda, there were several thousand years' worth of Bichuan Court savings, which contained a lot of good things. Now that they were facing extermination, Elder Qingyi decided to use these savings. Because of this, Qingxia wholeheartedly focused on concocting medicinal pills after she recovered from her injuries. As for Wei Haolan, she was indispensable in rebuilding the group, so the two elders were extremely generous and gave her the spiritual medicines they'd stored for a long time. Several months later, Wei Haolan's injuries finally stabilized and she also preserved her cultivation level. However, she was also surrounded by dead aura, so she might need more time to recover than Mo Tienga did. Moreover, her Dantian was injured, so she basically had no hope of advancing to the core formation realm. After learning about this from the two elders, Wei Haolan was dazed for a long time. Even if she was a cultivator who valued power more, it was still hard for her to accept that she might not be able to make a realm breakthrough. Fortunately, Wei Haolan was a strong person and had long prepared for her injuries, so she quickly adjusted her mood. She continued to heal her injuries every day and assisted Xia Qing in concocting medicinal pills. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Elder Qingyi and Qingmiao finally recovered from their injuries after using spiritual medicines. They announced that they'd enter closed-door meditation to cultivate secret techniques and that no one was allowed to disturb them on the 4th floor. After learning this news, Wei Haolan and the other two elders were dazed and looked sad, which made Tienga quite confused. She recalled what Qingyi and Qingmiao said when they invited her to be their guest official last time, so she secretly asked Wei Haolan about it. Sect leader Wei, does the secret art that the two elders spoke of harm one's life? Wei Haolan paused for a moment, then said with a sigh, "Fellow Taoist, Yi is now Bichuan Court's guest elder, so I should tell you about these things. Sect Wei Ling Wei for Qing I Ling Long from Ling, I our we. Up him sect. The Mo. Sect, Ling, sect, Long Ling, by sect, Ling, from I. The second half of this secret technique can only be practiced by cultivators at or above the core formation stage. Furthermore, it is time-consuming and laborious. Its effect is to combine the cultivation of several people into one. In this way, one will become the most powerful existence among core formation cultivators. In other words, Elder Qingxi used this blood prohibition secret technique? Wei Haolan nodded. Correct. Unfortunately, Elder Qingxi was already seriously injured at that time, and that person's power was extraordinary, so she could only stall him for a short while. What about Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao? Mo Tienga's expression was heavy. What would happen if they used this secret technique? Wei Haolan smiled bitterly. Although this secret technique can be practiced by cultivators in the core formation realm or higher, none of the core formation grandmasters of Bichuan Court ever practiced it. Mo Tienga was stunned. Why is that? Even if they couldn't protect their lives, it was still good to learn it just in case. Why didn't anyone practice it? Because, Wei Haolan said slowly, anyone who practices the second half of the blood prohibition secret technique can no longer be considered a human. Mo Tienga was silent for a long time. Can no longer be considered a human? What did that mean? If they weren't a human, what else could they be? As if she saw through Mo Tienga's confusion, Wei Haolan shook her head and said, the so-called blood prohibition requires blood as the price. If a person's blood is drained, wouldn't they become a mummy? How could they still be considered a human? Mo Tienga was dumbfounded. Wei Haolan looked away, hiding the sadness in her eyes. The two elders are already unafraid of death. We still have to cultivate diligently, rebuild Bichuan Court, and fulfill their unfulfilled wishes. It was no wonder the three of them had such expressions when they learned the two elders were going to practice the secret technique. Practicing this secret technique had doomed them from the very beginning. Whether they succeeded or not, they would still die. With such a heavy heart, Mo Chenga threw herself into recuperating and practicing spells. A strong enemy was right next to her, but she couldn't do anything. This kind of feeling was too unbearable. Ever since she built her foundation, she'd never had such an urgent desire to become stronger. Therefore, after confirming she had to spend a lot of time refining the dead aura, she devoted all her energy to studying the jade slip Mo Yaoqing left behind. In fact, this jade slip didn't contain any earth-shattering secret techniques. Instead, it contained all the techniques to use spells as well as the cultivation experience of the art of Sunu. Nevertheless, Mo Yaoqing was indeed a genius. Simple spells, after being explained by her, became more powerful. She made some subtle modifications, but they practically changed the appearance of some spells and greatly increased their power. Among them, the cultivation experience of the art of Sunu made Mo Chenga eagerly throw herself into it. Her main cultivation technique was the Sunu art of the origin modified by Zhong Muling, but it was a combination of Taiyuan record and the art of Sunu. There was no difference in the details between the two, so Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experience was completely applicable to Mo Chenga. In addition, there were also some things Mo Yaoqing casually recorded in the jade slip, such as the modification of some pill recipes, the concept of refining magic weapons, the methods of concocting medicinal pills, refining tools, formations, restrictions, and so on. Mo Chenga could see that these things were just her usual thoughts. Some of them had been tested, but some of them were just ideas. However, to be able to conceive pill recipes and a completely new method of refining magic weapons, she could definitely be regarded as a grandmaster, especially since there were so many aspects involved. After learning that Mo Yaoqing was such an all-rounder, Mo Chenga was both amazed and puzzled at the same time. With Mo Yaoqing's talent, she was almost not inferior to Wanderer Ziwei, so why was her original sect only treating her as an excellent dual cultivation candidate instead of cultivating her for the future? Mo Yaoqing's notes at the back of the jade slip solved her doubts. I stepped onto the path of immortality at the age of 5, built my foundation at the age of 20, formed my gold core at 100, and entered the nascent soul realm at 500. Outsiders don't know the hardships I went through, but it's a pity that I'm a woman with a pure Yin constitution. Otherwise, how could I wander from place to place, wander in a foreign land, and never be able to return to my homeland? As a woman, the path of immortality isn't easy. I think I'm talented and intelligent, but because I have a pure Yin constitution, I've always been regarded as a human furnace. I carefully investigated the reason. It's probably because most people on the path of immortality are men. Over time, people in the world were blinded by a single leaf and didn't recognize women's talents. This confession was filled with sighs of not being able to appreciate a woman's talent. Mo Chenga also sighed when she read it. In all fairness, although she also felt she was talented and intelligent, compared to Mo Yaoqing, she had no choice but to look up to her. There were too many things she had to learn from the records in this jade slip. Not to mention in the future, the current her definitely couldn't compare to Mo Yaoqing. Whether it was Mo Yaoqing or that Wanderer Ziwei, both made her realize that there were such geniuses in this world. She still had a long way to go, so she mustn't be complacent. The back of the notes also recorded some of Mo Yaoqing's private affairs. I met a male cultivator in Yunzhong. His name was Zhong Muling. He unexpectedly had a pure neutral constitution, and his nature was even rarer. He was indeed someone worth befriending. I met a man with a pure Yang constitution. He was indeed a good match. However, this person was arrogant and I didn't like him, so I dropped the matter. Later on, she wrote, unable to reach the nascent soul realm for a long time, I was extremely anxious. My enemies increased day by day. If I didn't make a realm breakthrough soon, it would be difficult for me to protect my body. After thinking for several days, I finally came up with a plan. This plan was the worst plan. Once I used it, I would feel ashamed to face Zhong Muling. However, I couldn't find a better plan for the time being. The man she mentioned should be Yuan Bao, but her tone sounded like she didn't care at all. Presumably, a genius like Mo Yaoqing was also very arrogant and disdained the path of dual cultivation. However, what method did she mention? Would she feel ashamed to face Zhong Muling? As Mo Chenga read on, she finally understood. Theoretically, dual cultivation with a pure Yang constitution is more effective, but I really didn't like that Taoist Yuan Bao. However, Zhong Muling's nature was sincere, so I liked him very much. He also had a pure neutral constitution. Although dual cultivation wasn't as good as a pure Yang constitution, it wasn't bad either. Although I was on good terms with Zhong Muling, this matter was really unfair to him. It was hard for me to say it, so I used the soul-frightening bell to confuse him. In the end, dual cultivation became a matter. Mo Chinga was dumbfounded. As it turned out, Zhong Muling was actually this ancestor of Mo Yaoqing's. Not only was her intelligence not inferior to a man's, but her methods and courage were also comparable to a man's. On one hand, Mo Chinga admired her, but on the other hand she felt that this matter was indeed not very kind. How could Zhong Muling be willing? Zhong Muling isn't a fickle person. What I did this time wasn't honorable enough, so I expected he'd definitely break off our friendship after he woke up. Unexpectedly, although Zhong Muling wasn't very happy, he didn't turn hostile towards me. He said I'd treated him well in the past, so he decided to let this matter go. I felt guilty, so after thinking about it, I decided to leave Yunzhong. After that, she talked about everything that happened in Linhai. She set up the transporting formation, went to Kunwu to rescue a group of women who were used as human furnaces, established Bishuan Court, and called herself Primordial Lady Bishui. Mo Chinga found some messy accounts interspersed in the story. After one night of being husband and wife, I unexpectedly became pregnant. I wholeheartedly wanted to cultivate to become an immortal, so I originally shouldn't have kept him. However, I couldn't bear it, so out of consideration for his father, I finally gave birth to him. Unfortunately, this child didn't have spiritual roots and was destined to have no fate with me, so I could only leave him in the secular world. There were many other things in between. Mo Chinga found another passage at the end. I'm now in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. I don't have much time left in my lifespan, so I already have no hope of making a realm breakthrough. Thinking about how I gave birth to a child in the past, I've had many descendants in the past several hundred years, but there are only a few people who have spiritual roots. Moreover, all of them have wasted spiritual roots, so it's inconvenient for me to lead them on the path to immortality. There are also 2 or 3 people with purine constitution, but none of them have spiritual roots. Now that I'm about to pass away, the art of Sunu will eventually be lost, so I have no choice but to take a trip to the secular world and seal a strand of my divine sense. If there are descendants with purine constitution, I'll pass on the art of Sunu. Chapter 216. After reading all the records, Mo Chinga didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Not only was her ancestor not inferior to men in intelligence, but she was also more decisive and courageous than men in handling things. She recalled the few days they spent together in Zhong Muling's virtual sky world. Zhong Muling was serious in speech and manner, but it turned out he used to have such a temperament. Facing Mo Yaoqing, he was no match for her in terms of momentum. Even the matter of dual cultivation was schemed against. No wonder there didn't seem to be any emotional disputes between Zhong Muling and Mo Yaoqing. As it turned out, this was the origin of the Mo family's inheritance of several thousand years. After sealing her divine sense in the Mo family's ancestral hall, Mo Yaoqing returned to Linhai. She also left her last words, entrusting the younger generation of Bishuan Court to take care of her descendants. However, when she was in the Mo family's village, Mo Chinga never saw the disciples sent by Bishuan Court. Perhaps Bishuan Court never found a person with spiritual roots who could be accepted as a disciple, so as time passed, the inheritors of the later generations no longer paid attention to them. It was also possible that they only came once every 20 or 30 years or even longer. However, from the time she was born until she left, it was only a short 10 years. Mo Chinga sighed when she read this. She had a father who was a core formation cultivator, a great ancestor who occasionally went to Jin to see his descendants, and a great-grandmother who entrusted her descendants to take care of them, but she ended up walking on the path to immortality. It could only be said that she was really not a lucky person. However, on the other hand, if she hadn't wandered from place to place for more than 10 years, she might not have the temperament she had today. She might be as proud and complacent as Hua Yilin or as weak and timid as Tang Xin. Suffering itself wasn't a beautiful memory, but sometimes, people still had to be grateful for some things that suffering brought, such as a strong heart and broad knowledge. After learning about Mo Yaoqing's life, Mo Chinga began to study some fragmentary things she recorded. In terms of formations, she made considerable progress by comparing them with Xuanji formation book. Although there were many books in the virtual sky world, there were too many books that surpassed her realm, so she couldn't understand many of them. The environment of the distant past era was also different from today's, so she couldn't copy them. Xuanji formation book and Mo Yaoqing's records happened to make up for this shortcoming. In addition, Mo Chinga noticed that there was a paragraph in Mo Yaoqing's notes. A magic treasure, a treasure that contains magic power. Cultivation affects a cultivator's advancement, but magic treasures represent a cultivator's strongest battle strength. Especially for core formation cultivators, the strength of their natal magic treasures almost determines the strength of their combat abilities. Cultivators in the core formation realm and above could refine their natal magic treasures. They would add their natal blood essence and refine it in their dantian, continuously nourishing it with their blood essence. Over time, the magic treasure would even become sentient. Simply put, a natal magic treasure was a magic treasure that was closely related to the cultivator. The longer it was nurtured, the greater its power would be. If the natal magic treasure was damaged, the cultivator would also be damaged. I've wandered the world all my life, from Yunzhong to the Celestial Pole. I don't know how many opponents I've met and how many magic treasures I've seen. Because of this, I've come up with several types of magic treasures for future disciples to choose as their natal magic treasures. Mo Chenga's spirit was lifted and she continued to read. In the past, when I was in Yunzhong's Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, I once saw a legend recorded in ancient times. In the legend, the Mother of Creation had a magic treasure called the Mountain and River Map. This map is actually a huge magic formation. If you're trapped inside, it'll be like the changes of the four symbols. If you think of a mountain, it'll be a mountain. If you think of water, it'll be water. If you think of the future, it'll be forward. If you think of the future, it'll be back. I've thought about it for a long time and came up with several types of magic treasures. Today I can try them out one by one. There were only 5 types of magic treasures, namely killing, protecting, confusing, trapping, and auxiliary. The killing type was used to attack, the protecting type was used to defend, the confusing type could make one lose their mind, the trapping type was used as a formation, the auxiliary type was used to break formations or clear one's mind, the auxiliary type was used to assist. The shuttle of flying Apsara was an offensive magic tool. Although it also had the function of setting formations, it was a killing formation. The white silk handkerchief was a defensive magic tool. The enchanting lantern, although it had the word enchanting in it, was actually a trapping formation. The cloud-treading boots and the spirit-concealing pendant were auxiliary magic tools. Mo Chenga reckoned the mountain and river map Mo Yaoqing mentioned should be a combination of trapping and confusing, and it also had the effect of killing. This kind of magic treasure was the most difficult to guard against because it was aimed at the weakness of a person's mental state. A brilliant confusing magic treasure could make people fall into its trap without them realizing it. If it was really like what Mo Yaoqing said, where one thought of mountains and rivers, one needed to have a very strong willpower to get rid of it. However, even a nascent soul cultivator's mental state wasn't perfect. 5 elements plate. This plate is actually a large formation plate with the following formation engraved on it. The advantage of this thing is that it can be used without using too much spiritual aura, but its disadvantage is that it's hard to deal with for people who know formations like the back of their hand. Black and white life and death chess. This thing is shaped like a chess piece. If you make a wrong move, you'll be killed. The materials needed are very expensive. The production method is as follows. Unfortunately, the confusing effect isn't strong, so it's difficult to reach the state where one thinks of mountains and rivers. Heaven and earth fan. The painting of mountains and rivers as the surface of the fan is actually a formation, but it can be made like this. If it can be made like this, it'll be very powerful. Unfortunately, the materials are too hard to find. Mo Chenga's gaze fell on this heaven and earth fan. Its main materials were clearly written. The handle is made from the bone of an 8th-rank spiritual beast and above, with 1,000-year-old chalcedony. The bone of a divine beast is the best, and the older the chalcedony, the better. The painting of the fan is made from a bewitching moonstone. She hastily went back to read it again. Yes, the main materials were clearly written, and it just so happened that she had the bone of a divine dragon and the bewitching moonstone. Mo Chenga didn't think much about her natal magic weapon before. She had a middle-stage nascent soul master, so after she formed her gold core, she could naturally get a lot of magic weapon formulas from her master. At that time she could just choose one. But if this heaven and earth fan was really as powerful as Mo Yaoqing said, it could basically be regarded as a top-grade magic weapon. Generally speaking, the natal magic weapons of core formation cultivators weren't very good, probably because they were limited by their abilities and materials for magic weapons above the middle grade were too difficult to find. However, natal magic weapons were too important, and no cultivator was willing to wait until they were in the middle or late stage or even the nascent soul realm to refine them. Compared to natal magic weapons, ordinary magic weapons were a bit inferior, even if they were 1 rank higher. Therefore, they would usually refine ordinary natal magic weapons as soon as they formed their gold cores and slowly cultivate them with their blood essence over a long period of time. After a long time, the magic weapons would gradually become more powerful. But if the magic weapons they refined from the beginning were excellent, they would have a higher starting point than others and would naturally become more powerful in the future. In addition, she was skilled in formations, so it would be best if she could use formations as magic weapons. After thinking for a while, she went to find Wei Haolan, who was studying ancient books. Sect Head Wei, do you have time? Wei Haolan looked up from the book and asked with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yi, do you need something? Mo Chenga said, I have something to ask. Wei Haolan looked at Xia Qin, who was concocting pills, and Tang Xin, who was concentrating on cultivating, then said, let's go downstairs. Mo Chenga nodded. Concocting pills and cultivating generally couldn't be disturbed, but the two elders were worried that no one would take care of them. If something happened, it would be troublesome to deal with them, so they let the four of them cultivate on the same floor. Usually, the four of them did their own things and didn't disturb each other. The two of them went to the second floor, found two praying mats at random and sat down. Mo Chenga waved the jade slip in her hand. Sect Head Wei, may I ask if anyone has tried to refine the magic weapons recorded in the Patriarch's notes? Wei Haolan took the jade slip and immersed her divine sense into it. After a while, she answered, the Patriarch's notes can only be studied by the elders and the sect head. Some people have indeed tried to refine some of the magic weapons and medicinal pills recorded in it. I remember when I was young, a core formation elder tried to refine a purple gold gourd. Although he failed, it proved that it was possible to refine this treasure. What about this one? Mo Chenga asked, has anyone refined this heaven and earth fan? Wei Haolan looked at it then shook her head. Fellow Taoist Yi, this heaven and earth fan requires the bones of spiritual beasts in the 8th rank or above. After the Patriarch, only one nascent soul cultivator appeared in our Bichuan court. Where could we get the materials? That was true. Not to mention the bones of 8th rank spiritual beasts, even 1,000-year-old chalcedony is hard to find. Even if it occasionally appears, it'll sell for more than 10,000 spirit stones at the very least. Also, we don't know what this Qian stone is. I estimate the materials needed to refine this magic weapon would cost at least tens of thousands of spirit stones, as well as absolute good luck and super strong strength. At this point, Wei Haolan shook her head and sighed. Not to mention that we can't get them. Even if we did, we wouldn't refine a magic weapon we don't know if we can successfully refine. We're too short on materials. I see. Mo Chenga was a bit disappointed. If Bichuan court had refined these magic weapons before, she would try to refine them. If she liked them, she would use them as her natal magic weapon. This magic weapon was too powerful. It could trap, confuse, and kill. It would be very difficult to find a more powerful magic weapon. Fellow Taoist Mo, do you want to refine this magic weapon? Wei Haolan asked. Mo Chenga nodded then shook her head. After we go back this time, I'll enter closed-door meditation to advance to the core formation realm. If I succeed, I'll have to refine my natal magic weapon first. Originally, I saw how powerful this magic weapon was, so I was just considering it. I didn't have to refine it. Wei Haolan said, if it's fellow Taoist Yi, it'll be much more convenient than us. Your sect is a big cultivation group, so it naturally has more information and materials than us. Your master also has a rather high status, so if he lacks anything, he can order his disciples to slowly look for it. That's true, but the cost is really expensive and the materials are too rare. Let's take a look first. After I return to the group, I'll report to my master and see if it's feasible. Upon hearing what Mo Chenga said, Wei Haolan said with a stern expression, Fellow Taoist Yi, you're now Bichuan court's guest elder, so you can naturally read this notebook. However, many of the things in it are Bichuan court's secrets, so I hope you won't leak them. Mo Chenga said, rest assured, Sect Head Wei. I won't take out the notebook. I'll just let my master evaluate the formula of this magic weapon. Wei Haolan hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded. That's fine. In any case, this magic weapon formula was just sitting there in Bichuan court. No one would refine it. Mo Chenga smiled then asked, Sect Head Wei, how are your injuries? Wei Haolan said, they're the same as before. Although my cultivation level is preserved, my Dantian was seriously injured, so I have to slow down my recovery. At this point she sighed and said, in any case, the two elders still have to spend a long time cultivating secret techniques, so I'll just take my time to heal. Fellow Taoist Yi, what about you? Are you feeling better? Wei Haolan had always been very concerned about Mo Chenga's injuries. Mo Chinga knew Wei Haolan was now a guest elder, and Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao told Wei Haolan that she'd be assisting Bishuan court in its reconstruction, so Wei Haolan was very concerned about her injuries. However, no matter what the reason was, it was always good to have someone care about her. "I'm fine," Mo Chinga answered. "The dead aura I'm suffering from isn't much, so it didn't harm my foundation. However, the Dantian real fire of a foundation building cultivator is too weak for this dead aura. According to my estimation, it might take me 7 or 8 years or even 10 years to completely refine it." Wei Haolan was silent for a while upon hearing Mo Chinga's answer. She then said, "That being the case, let Junior Marshal Sister Xia concoct some medicinal pills for you. Maybe it'll be a bit faster." Mo Chinga shook her head. "I don't lack medicinal pills, so sect head Wei doesn't need to worry." Although there were a lot of medicinal pills stored in the pagoda, in the end, pill concocting required fresh spiritual plants, so there weren't many medicinal pills that could be concocted. Since she was now a guest elder of Bishuan court, she also had to think about Bishuan court. She really didn't need to fight with Wei Haolan and Tang Xin over these medicinal pills. Chapter 217. Every day she would heal her injuries, cultivate and study the notes Mo Yaoqing left behind. Mo Chinga only felt that time flew by. In the blink of an eye, several years had passed just like that. She had a temperament that could endure loneliness. She had also been in closed-door meditation for several years before, so now that she was immersed in Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experiences, she didn't find it difficult at all. In any case, she just considered it closed-door meditation. It was common for foundation-building cultivators to be in closed-door meditation for several years or even dozens of years. Wei Haolan was also like this. She spent most of her time healing and refining the dead aura. Occasionally, she chatted with Mo Chinga about some matters related to the group, which allowed Mo Chinga to learn more about Bishuan court's situation. Presumably, Wei Haolan also did this deliberately. She shouldered the heavy responsibility of rebuilding Bishuan court, but Xia Qing and Tang Xin couldn't share this responsibility with her. Mo Chinga, on the other hand, was appointed by the two elders to help her rebuild the group in the future, so she had to have a rough understanding of the group's situation. Xia Qing also sometimes talked about pill concocting with her. She was a simple-minded person, so even in this kind of situation she was still thinking about pill concocting. As for Tang Xin, he obviously didn't have enough patience. His cultivation level was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm, and he wasn't very old, so presumably he spent very little time in closed-door meditation after building his foundation. However, he also knew how to be patient because of his great hatred. In the beginning he often couldn't concentrate on cultivating, but gradually he was able to meditate for several days or even several months like them. As for Ren Yufeng, who was outside the pagoda, sometimes he didn't show up for a long time, so long that they thought he'd lost his patience, but then he suddenly appeared. In the beginning, Ren Yufeng was still interested in showing off to the people inside the pagoda, but they never paid attention to him. Later he got tired of it and simply occupied Bishuan court's monastery, playing the game of founding a sect. He captured the individual cultivators in the vicinity and some former Bishuan court cultivators, called it Divine Dragon Sect, and proclaimed himself the sect head. For the sake of survival, these cultivators all became yes-men. This greatly satisfied Ren Yufeng, so he simply became the sect head of Divine Dragon Sect. He only sent 2 cultivators to guard the entrance of the Tao Achieving Pagoda and no longer paid attention to them. Mo Chinga remembered that when Ren Yufeng first gathered people outside the Tao Achieving Pagoda to hold the so-called sect-establishing ceremony, Wei Haolan looked at the crowd below with tears in her eyes. She saw her loved ones among these people. Their figures were thin and frail, their bodies covered in scars. They must have suffered great torment, looking like walking corpses. She once asked Wei Haolan roughly how many Bishuan court cultivators were still alive. Wei Haolan was silent for a long time. In the end she said, "Perhaps there are still a lot of people alive, but after being tortured like this, I'm afraid they don't even have the least bit of self-respect left. It's not difficult to rebuild the sect and call back the disciples, but it's very difficult to restore the confidence they once had as cultivators." Mo Chinga was speechless. She didn't have any management skills, so she couldn't help. Year after year, time flowed like water. Finally, 10 years later, Mo Chinga completely dissolved all the dead aura and returned to her peak state. She then devoted herself wholeheartedly to cultivating. The teleportation formation on the 4th floor was still closed, and there was no news from the 2 elders. The 4 of them had no choice but to wait. After another 5 years, with the support of Xia Qing's medicinal pills, Tang Xin finally advanced to the middle stage of the foundation building realm, bringing a trace of joy to the Tao-achieving pagoda that had been dull for more than 10 years. To encourage everyone, Wei Haolan suggested they take a day off to celebrate with Tang Xin. However, they'd been locked up in the pagoda for more than 10 years, so they couldn't hold any banquets. Fortunately, Wei Haolan left some good wine in her Qingkuan bag, so they could use it to make up for the occasion. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, it's your happy occasion, so you should drink a bit more today. Wei Haolan urged him to drink with a smile. Xia Qing also temporarily put aside pill concocting and nodded repeatedly. That's right. Senior Marshal Brother Tang, it's only been more than 10 years since you advanced to the middle stage, right? Advancing to the middle stage in 30 years is really amazing. Tang Xin touched his nose somewhat embarrassedly and said, if I wasn't locked up in the pagoda and could only restrain my thoughts, I wouldn't have advanced so quickly. Besides, Junior Marshal Sister Xia has been concocting medicinal pills for me, fellow Taoist Yi has been explaining her experiences to me, and Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head has often comforted me. It's all thanks to all of you that I can advance so quickly. After more than 10 years of devoted cultivation, although he was still thin-skinned, he no longer blushed easily and his temperament also became a lot calmer. Wei Haolan said with a smile, this is all we can do, you still have to rely on yourself to cultivate. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, you're not even 60 years old yet, but you're already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, you're indeed one of the best talents in our Bichuan court. Tang Xin smiled, but his expression soon turned gloomy again. Bichuan court only has us left. Wei Haolan and Xia Qing were both silent upon hearing what he said. Outside the Tao-achieving pagoda, cultivators occasionally came and went, but they were no longer Bichuan court disciples. Soon, however, Wei Haolan forced a smile and said, what's there to be afraid of? When the two elders come out of closed-door meditation and eliminate that devil cultivator, we can naturally rebuild the group. Besides, many of the original disciples are still here, we can just call them back when the time comes. Tang Xin also realized he shouldn't have mentioned this matter, so he also smiled and chimed in, right. What Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head said is right, we can just go out and rebuild the group. Come, let's drink. As he said that, Tang Xin gulped down a cup of wine. Unexpectedly, he didn't know how to drink and this wine was quite spicy, so his expression immediately became distorted, looking extremely wonderful. Upon seeing his expression, the three women present all laughed. This was Bichuan court's most popular handsome man, young Master Tang Xin. He was always graceful, gentle and refined. When had he ever lost his composure like this? Junior Marshal Brother Tang, if you can't drink, just drink a little less. Come, wipe your mouth. Wei Haolan handed him a towel, but she still couldn't help but look at him with a smile. She said he was a lot calmer now, but he still couldn't help but blush. With great difficulty, Tang Xin finally managed to swallow the wine. He took the towel then coughed while wiping the spilled wine. I've made Senior Marshal Sisters and Junior Marshal Sisters laugh at me? Xia Qing waved her hand. Senior Marshal Brother Tang, this is nothing. Previously, I secretly smeared 3 leaves golden sunflower powder on Senior Marshal Sister Hua's medicinal pills. Senior Marshal Sister Hua's expression was truly wonderful. 3-leafed golden sunflower was a kind of commonly seen spiritual medicine. It didn't have much use, but it was very spicy. Just a little bit of it would make people who couldn't eat spicy food feel like their mouths were on fire. Mo Chenga once used it as a seasoning, so she was very clear about it. Upon hearing what Xia Qing said, Mo Chenga asked, is the Senior Marshal Sister Hua you're talking about that fellow Taoist Hua Yilin? Yes, Xia Qing said with a disdainful expression. I don't like Senior Marshal Sister Hua. She always likes to put on airs and even gives me that attitude. She never thought that her medicinal pills were in my hands. At this point, Xia Qing's expression turned gloomy. In the past, I wasn't sensible and always thought Senior Marshal Sister Hua was hateful, so I wanted to embarrass her whenever I had the chance. In fact, Senior Marshal Sister Hua didn't do anything bad, she was just a bit arrogant and despotic. I wonder how she's doing now. The atmosphere once again turned silent. Even though they were forcing themselves to smile, they still remembered their sorrowful past from time to time. Let's not talk about this. This time it was Tang Xin who spoke. He turned towards Wei Haolan. Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head, are your injuries healed? Wei Haolan nodded with a smile. They're almost healed. The dead aura has been dissolved. In the future, as long as I slowly meditate and recuperate, my injuries will naturally heal. Xia Qing said, Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head, during this period of time, I'll concoct another batch of healing medicinal pills for you. You mustn't be reluctant to take them. If you're not well, Bichuan Court is not well, you have to cherish yourself. Yes. Tang Xin took over. In the past, I wasn't sensible and always caused trouble for Senior Martial Sister Sect Head. In the future, I'll definitely cultivate diligently. Wei Haolan smiled. Her smile was filled with joy. You're all sensible now. That's good. Her gaze then shifted towards Mo Chenga, who had been silent all this time. Fellow Taoist Yi, these past few years, thanks to you often teaching Junior Martial Brother Tang. I'm afraid Junior Martial Sister Xia and I don't have any hope of advancing to the core formation realm, so we can only count on you and Junior Martial Brother Tang. Mo Chenga showed a faint smile. It's nothing. I'm now Bichuan Court's guest elder, so I naturally have to do my part. In fact, Tang Xin could be considered quite intelligent. He also had a pure yang constitution and decent spiritual roots. In the past, perhaps because of his flawed character, he was always unable to meditate and cultivate. In the past 10-odd years he had to meditate even if he didn't want to. Moreover, he was stimulated by his great hatred, so he constantly reminded himself to be strong, so he grew very fast. Mo Chenga reckoned that even if he couldn't form his nascent soul, forming his core shouldn't be a problem. Yes, fellow Taoist Yi is now one of us. Xia Qing interrupted, therefore fellow Taoist Yi, you mustn't hide anything. We should discuss pill concocting issues more often. Xia Qing once again changed the topic to pill concocting out of habit, causing the other three people to laugh. Wei Haolan paused for a moment then said, since fellow Taoist Yi is one of us, wouldn't it be too distant for us to still call her fellow Taoist Yi? That's true, Xia Qing said, but I seem to have heard the two elders call fellow Taoist Yi something before? It's been too long so I can't remember. The corners of Mo Chenga's mouth curved into a smile. My original surname was Mo, and my name was Tienga. Right, it seems to be Tienga. Fellow Taoist Yi, why did you use a fake name? Oh no, let's just call her Senior Martial Sister Mo from now on. Yi Xiaotian isn't a fake name. This was the first time she explained the problem of names to others. Mo is my mother's surname while my father's surname is Yi. Yi Xiaotian was the name my uncle gave me. Yi, Mo, Xia Qing thought for a moment. Both are good, but since Mo Chenga is her original name, let's just call her Senior Martial Sister Mo from now on, okay? It's hard to say who's older and who's younger. Yi Haolan knew Mo Chenga's background, so she said with a smile, Junior Martial Sister Xia, in terms of cultivation level, you have to call me Senior Martial Sister. In terms of age, you should count your years first. And I don't need to count my years. To you, I'm already an old woman. Senior Martial Sister, you're only 100 years old. How are you old? Xia Qing spoke quickly. Right now. I think I'm 53. I also know Senior Martial Brother Tang. You're older than me, by 6 years? You should be 59 now, right? Tang Xin nodded with a smile. Senior Martial Sister Mo, what about you? Mo Chenga said with a smile, in that case you really have to call me Senior Martial Sister. I'm 55 now, so I'm 2 years older than you. Xia Qing was astonished. Even Tang Xin's eyes widened. Since they were injured and hid inside the Dao Achieving Pagoda, Mo Chenga didn't need to hide her cultivation level anymore. Therefore, Xia Qing and Tang Xin already knew she was a late-stage foundation-building cultivator, but since the two elders and Wei Haolan didn't care, they didn't say anything. It was also because of this that Xia Qing called Mo Chenga Senior Martial Sister, as if it was a matter of course. She was 55 now and they had been hiding inside the Dao Achieving Pagoda for 16 years. Didn't that mean she was only 39 years old back then? A 39-year-old late-stage foundation-building cultivator. This was indeed astonishing. Tang Xin was the first to regain his train of thought. He said sincerely, it turns out fellow Taoist Yi is such a genius. I was really rude. Other people didn't know, but Mo Chenga understood the hidden meaning in his words. However, this matter was Tang Xin's misunderstanding. Back then, Mo Chenga rejected his dual cultivation proposal not because she thought his aptitude wasn't good enough for her, but because she didn't want to perform dual cultivation with him. Chapter 218. Mo Chenga didn't explain. In any case, the dual cultivation proposal had long been rejected, and she wouldn't have anything to do with Tang Xin in the future, so there was no need to explain. Tang Xin also didn't mention it. He just smiled and said, that being the case, I'd better call you Senior Martial Sister. Senior Martial Sister Mo is so young, but you already have such a high cultivation level, it's only right to call you Senior Martial Sister. In the cultivation world, seniority wasn't determined by age. Only people who had a very close relationship, such as fellow disciples, would be determined by age. Even after their cultivation levels increased, they still addressed each other like that to show respect. They'd lived together in this pagoda for more than 10 years. Although they spent most of their time doing their own things, their relationship wasn't like ordinary people's, so they talked about age. Now that he learned Mo Chinga's cultivation level was so much higher than his, Tang Xin sincerely felt he should call her senior martial sister. Xia Qing said, "In any case, I should call you senior martial sister. Senior martial sister Mo, you're so awesome, so you have to take care of me in the future." Junior martial sister Xia. Wei Haolan gave her a sidelong glance and also smiled. "That's true. Fellow Taoist Yi is now a guest elder of Bichuan Court, so you have to take care of us." Mo Chinga waved her hand. "Please don't laugh at me. I'm just relying on the shadow of my elders." Wei Haolan was about to speak, but the four of them suddenly felt a spiritual aura fluctuation. They stopped and turned to look at the transporting formation at the same time. The transporting formation flashed and Elder Chingy's voice came, "The four of you come up." Hearing the elder's voice again after 15 years, the four of them couldn't help but feel excited. Wei Haolan pressed her chest to calm her excitement and said, "It seems the two elders have come out of closed-door meditation. Let's go up to see them." Of course, no one had any objections. The four of them put down their wine cups, stood up, and walked towards the transporting formation. During these 15 years, the transporting formation had been closed. Now that it was open and they were summoned, the two elders must have come out of closed-door meditation. Standing on the transporting formation, there was a flash of light, and the four of them appeared on the fourth floor. Although they were eager to see the two elders, the three of them didn't dare to look up. They all knew the consequences of the two elders cultivating the blood prohibition secret technique. Although they had 15 years to prepare, seeing it with their own eyes was a different matter. Therefore, Mo Chinga was the first to see the two elders' appearances. The two elders were sitting side by side on the praying mats at the head of the table. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but they had put on their cloaks and veils. The veil and cloak not only blocked their vision but also blocked their divine sense. The two elders' cultivation was higher than theirs, so they couldn't see their real appearances. Greetings to the two elders. Mo Chinga was the first to greet them. She could also be considered a member of Bichuan Court now, so she no longer needed to call her senior. Hearing that there was nothing unusual in her voice, the other three raised their heads. Their eyes were filled with relief but also sadness. The two elders must have been afraid of scaring them, so they covered their appearances. "Greetings, elders." Wei Haolan took the lead and saluted. Elder Chingy nodded slightly. "You've worked hard these past 15 years. Her voice, however, was much more hoarse than before. Wei Haolan respectfully replied, "Compared to the two elders, this little bit of hard work is nothing at all." "You're a good child," Elder Qingyao said. Elder Qingyao took over the conversation. Although her appearance couldn't be seen, her voice was obviously aged. "You don't need to blame yourselves. This is a responsibility we must bear as elders of Bichuan Court." Tang Xin lowered his head and secretly wiped the corners of his eyes. Upon seeing him, Elder Qingyi said, "Xin, you've made a realm breakthrough?" "Yes." Tang Xin lowered his head. "I'm sorry, elders. I was too immature before." Elder Qingyi chuckled softly. "Child, you've finally grown up. If your great-grandmother in the underworld knew about this, she'd definitely be happy." Tang Xin was Elder Qingxi's beloved grandson. Ever since he was a child, he grew up in front of the three elders. The two elders also regarded him as their junior. Now that they saw Tang Xin's cultivation level had advanced and he had also matured a lot, they felt very comforted. Tang Xin wiped his tears and answered with a low voice, "Yes. In the future, Xin will certainly cultivate diligently and won't disappoint the two elders and great-grandmother anymore." The two elders' gazes then shifted to the others. Elder Qingyi continued to ask, "Haolan Chenga, are your injuries healed?" "Yes," Wei Haolan answered. Wei Haolan answered, "Rest assured, Elder. My injuries are almost healed. Elder Mo already dissolved my dead aura 5 years ago." "Oh." Elder Qingyao looked at Mo Chenga and said, "Chenga, come up and let us have a look." "Yes," Mo Chenga answered, then walked forward. Elder Qingyao stretched out her hand like lightning, grabbing Mo Chenga's wrist and pouring her spiritual aura into it. Mo Chenga only felt pain and numbness in her meridians. Elder Qingyao's spiritual aura was stronger than she imagined. It seemed to have reached the peak of the core formation realm. However, her spiritual aura was very strange. There was a kind of hidden mania that made her feel very uneasy. She looked down and saw her bare hands. They were as dry as an old tree, deathly pale and without any color of blood. They couldn't even be called hands anymore. Moreover, she remembered that when she first met this elder Qingyao 16 years ago, she still had a delicate and pretty face and her charm was still there. Even though she didn't have deep feelings for her like Wei Haolan and the other two, Mo Qiange still felt a bit sad. Although this was a world where benefits were paramount, it wasn't completely ruthless. Elder Qingyao quickly released her hands and said with relief, "Very good. Qiange, not only are your injuries healed, but your spiritual aura is also much purer than before. Presumably you've been very diligent these past dozen years." Mo Qiange retreated. "Elders, you've contributed a lot. Since Junior has received your favor, I should also do something for Bishuan Court." "You can think that way, we really didn't misjudge you." Elder Qingyi nodded with a smile. "Alright, I called you here for two reasons. First, we've finished practicing the blood prohibition secret technique and we're officially out of closed-door meditation today. Second, this isn't enough to deal with that devil cultivator, we still need to prepare some things." "Elder," Wei Haolan said, "if you need to prepare anything just tell us. We'll definitely do it seriously." "We need to prepare two things," Elder Qingyi said calmly. "First, that devil cultivator's dead aura is really powerful. If you get touched by it, you probably won't be able to hold on. We searched for a long time and finally found a kind of talisman that can guard against this kind of dead aura. Therefore, in the following time, you need to put aside everything else and draw this kind of talisman, the more, the better." "Elder," Xia Qing said, "we don't know how to draw talismans, how can we learn it in a short time?" "Then you'll learn until you can draw it," Elder Qingyi said without hesitation. "As for the second thing, it's a magic weapon. You won't be able to help us with this, so only Junior Marshal Sister Qingmiao and I can refine it." None of them was a refining master. Refining tools was different from drawing talismans. No matter how lacking talisman paper and other materials were, they were still easy to obtain. Besides, the 7th floor of the Dao Achieving Pagoda was where Bishuan Court stored their treasures for several thousand years. The materials for refining tools, on the other hand, were much more precious, especially rare materials for magic weapons. They simply couldn't be wasted like this. "Not bad." Elder Qingyao passed her a jade slip. "Haolan, later, go to the 7th floor and get the talisman paper and brush you need. Draw according to this. No matter how long it takes, you have to draw at least several hundred talismans. That way we'll be able to deal with that devil cultivator." "Yes," Wei Haolan answered. However, she hesitated for a moment and said, "Elders, can you hold on?" Cultivating the second half of the blood prohibition secret technique meant death, but she didn't know how long it would take for her to die. Elder Qingyi said faintly, "Rest assured. We two old women won't dare to die until we get rid of any future troubles for you." Wei Haolan's gaze wavered, but she didn't dare to ask again. She just lowered her head and answered, "Yes." "Tinga." Mo Qiange stepped forward. "I'm here. Go with Haolan. Your pill concocting skills are outstanding. If there's any medicinal pills that might be helpful, just take the materials and refine them." Mo Qiange paused for a moment, then cupped her hands. "I understand." This was a way of expressing their trust in her. Not only did they let her enter the group's treasury, but they also let her take whatever she wanted. If she wasn't a trusted disciple, they wouldn't do this at all. Mo Qiange sighed inwardly. She felt her weakness had been found. She didn't think she was a kind person, but if someone treated her well, she'd want to repay them. The two elders treated her so well, how could she repay them? Not only was she determined to be their guest elder, but if she succeeded in her cultivation, she'd also have to take care of them often. "Alright, you two go back first." "That's all." "Yes." The four of them responded in unison. Xia Qing and Tang Xin went back to the 3rd floor, while Mo Qiange and Wei Haolan went to the 7th floor. Influenced by the two elders, the two of them didn't say a word on the way. When they reached the 7th floor, Wei Haolan opened the restriction and said, "Elder Mo, over there is the spiritual panacea area. You can take whatever you want and come back here to register." "Okay." Mo Qiange looked around then nodded. 16 years ago, when they first hid inside the pagoda, the two elders brought her and Tang Xin up to the 7th floor. At that time, the two elders gave them a lot of medicinal pills and bestowed magic weapons to Tang Xin and Xia Qing. Because they learned about her life experience, they also very generously gave her Mo Yaoqing's personal notes. Although the notes didn't seem as precious as the magic weapons, Wei Haolan said only the sect head and elders could read the patriarch's notes. Being willing to give them to her was already a huge favor. Moreover, the notes were more important to her than any magic weapons. Although the two elders treated her like this because they hoped she could help Wei Haolan rebuild Bichuan Court, kindness was kindness. Since she accepted it, she should repay them a little. Mo Qianga took a deep breath and quickly picked dozens of spiritual panaceas. She then found Wei Haolan and said, "Sect head, I'm done." Wei Haolan was rummaging among the cinnabars and other things. Eventually she found several jars of beast blood. "Let's go. We can go down after we record them." Mo Qianga followed Wei Haolan to the altar table. She took out the register and recorded, but Mo Qianga raised her head to look at Mo Yaoqing's statue. Her great-grandmother had a rough life, but she had always been strong and unyielding, proud and self-reliant. If she knew that the sect she established was almost destroyed by a cultivator in the foundation-building realm who practiced evil methods, she would definitely be very angry, wouldn't she? However, while she was angry, she must also be very gratified. Although her disciples weren't as talented as her, they didn't lose her lofty and unyielding character. As long as her lofty character remained, Bichuan Court could still be rebuilt. Elder Mo, upon hearing Wei Haolan's voice, Mo Qianga regained her train of thought. "What's wrong? Are you confident?" Wei Haolan didn't look at her. Instead, she was fiddling with the jade slip in her hand. "No." Mo Qianga answered honestly in front of Wei Haolan. "I like to take matters into my own hands, but this time I'm not capable of doing it. I'm not confident at all. However, it doesn't matter if we're not confident. It's fine as long as the two elders are confident." "Correct." Wei Haolan also raised her head to look at the statue. She then knelt down softly. "Patriarch, please bless Bichuan Court. We'll kill our enemies and take back our monastery." Chapter 219. Inside the Tao Achieving Pagoda, it was once again busy. The two elders were still in closed-door meditation, refining magic weapons. The four juniors were either concocting medicinal pills, healing injuries, or drawing talismans. Wei Haolan's injuries hadn't completely healed, and Xiaqing wasn't good at other things. Seeing this, Mo Qianga taught Xiaqing some special medicinal pill concocting techniques while she and Tang Xin took on talisman making. Now that they had a definite goal, the atmosphere inside the Tao Achieving Pagoda was tense, but it was also full of hope. The talismans the two elders talked about were high-grade talismans. Foundation-building cultivators could draw them, but they needed a long time to practice. The talisman paper and talisman water needed to make these talismans all needed special materials. To reduce the consumption of materials, Mo Qianga and Tang Xin both started practicing with low-grade talismans. Mo Qianga really didn't have any talent in talisman making. She was only talented in formations, but her pill concocting skills were SOSO. Talisman making, on the other hand, was really out of talent. However, she had to draw talismans, so she had to immerse herself in practicing. Fortunately, Tang Xin's talent in talisman making was unexpectedly good, relieving her a lot of pressure. The fourth floor of the Tao Achieving Pagoda was closed again. The two elders concentrated on refining magic weapons. Wei Haolan meditated to heal her injuries, Xiaqing immersed herself in concocting medicinal pills, and Mo Qianga and Tang Xin focused on drawing talismans. Another 4 years went by as he prepared for this. In fact, Wei Haolan's injuries healed in the 3rd year, and Xiaqing also joined the ranks of talisman making in the 2nd year. 3 years later, Tang Xin finally succeeded in making this poison-resisting talisman. The two elders finally came out of their closed-door meditation after 4 years. The 6 people gathered again. "Elder, is the magic weapon finished?" "Yes." Elder Qingyi's hoarse voice carried a hint of joy. "After several failures, the magic weapon to deal with that devil cultivator is finally finished." The 4 juniors smiled at the same time. They had been trapped in this Tao Achieving Pagoda for 20 years, and they finally had a chance to leave. Although Mo Qianga didn't look too excited, she was very happy inside. This time, she only came out to experience the world for the sake of tempering her mental state. She didn't expect it would take her more than 20 years. She didn't know how Xianqing School was doing after she left for more than 20 years. Was that cheap master of hers still an unrefined old man? Had Jinji already built his foundation? Was everything safe and sound in her little cave residence? Thinking up to this point, she wished she could grow a pair of wings, directly cross demonic mountain range and fly back to Xianqing School. The Tao Attainment Pagoda, which had been closed for 20 years, was finally open. The 2 so-called Divine Dragon Sect disciples guarding outside the pagoda were chatting happily as usual. They were sent to guard the Dao-achieving pagoda, but they didn't have much to do for more than 10 years, so they'd long forgotten Ren Yufeng's instructions. Every day they chatted and talked nonsense, drank and gambled. When the Dao Attainment Pagoda's original transfer array lit up, 2 gamblers were still rolling the dice to bet on the ownership of this month's spirit stones. A group of 6 people appeared on the transporting formation. The 2 core formation elders smiled coldly. Elder Qingmiao waved her hand, causing a powerful spiritual aura pressure to cover them. The 2 low-level cultivators raised their heads in panic, and only then did they see the 6 people on the teleportation array. For a moment, their mouths were wide open and they were speechless. They didn't have time to speak. Under the pressure, the 2 of them opened their eyes wide and blood flowed out of their 7 orifices. They silently fell to the ground. Humph. Elder Qingmiao humphed coldly. It's really shameful to send such a person to stand guard. Elder Qingyi said, don't worry about them, we'll do our own thing. Xiaqing Shen, you 2 go gather the original Bichuan court disciples and inform them that we're out. If other individual cultivators surrender, we won't make things difficult for them, but if they're stubborn, kill them on the spot. Yes. Xiaqing and Tang Shen accepted the order. Haolan, Tiange, open the Great Mountain Protecting Formation. We mustn't let that devil cultivator escape. Yes. Elder Qingyi waved her hand. Alright, let's split up. When you're done, gather in the conference hall. The 4 of them split into 2 groups and left after receiving the order. Bichuan Court's Great Mountain Protecting Formation was also set up by Mo Yaoqing years ago. With her exceptional aptitude, this Great Mountain Protecting Formation was extremely powerful. However, 20 years ago, Shangguan Yunhao harbored evil intentions. He colluded with Ren Yufeng and secretly closed the Great Mountain Protecting Formation, causing it to become useless. The 2 elders had long made a plan. On one hand, they'd gather the original disciples to kill Ren Yufeng. On the other hand, they'd open the Great Mountain Protecting Formation to hinder Ren Yufeng. By doing these 2 things well, the 2 of them would have more than an 80% chance of killing Ren Yufeng. Mo Qiange followed Wei Haolan and flew towards the Great Mountain Protecting Formation. They encountered many low-level disciples on the way, but the 2 of them ignored them all. Wei Haolan only stopped when they were far away from Bichuan Court's pavilions and saw a towering watchtower. Elder Mo, please lend me a hand. Mo Qiange nodded. The Great Mountain Protecting Formation was huge, so opening it by herself would inevitably be too much for her. Ren Yufeng had long been possessed by the devil. Even though he created the so-called Divine Dragon sect, it was nothing more than a secular world bandit occupying a mountain and acting like a king. It basically didn't look like a cultivation group at all. He also didn't understand the purpose of this Great Mountain Protecting Formation. Now, there was actually no one inside the watchtower. Mo Qiange's attainments and formations were incomparable to cultivators in the same realm as her. Wei Haolan took out the formation blueprint, and the 2 of them repaired it one by one according to the blueprint. After spending half a day, they finally finished repairing the damaged parts. Right now, they both sensed spiritual aura fluctuations coming from inside Bichuan Court. The 2 of them must have started fighting against Ren Yufeng. The 2 of them were a bit worried. After sensing with rapt attention for a while, Mo Qiange said, the 2 elders should be fine. The dead aura in this spiritual aura fluctuation isn't strong. Presumably, the 2 elders suppressed it. Wei Haolan looked at her with a bit of astonishment then nodded. Bichuan Court had a circumference of several hundred miles, and their current location was also several hundred miles away from the inner part of Bichuan Court. Mo Qiange's divine sense must have been very strong to be able to sense it. Wei Haolan thought to herself that the 2 elders indeed had extraordinary foresight. This elder Mo was so young, but she already had this kind of ability. Presumably she'd advance to the core formation realm soon. In that case, although this elder Mo wouldn't stay in Linhai for long, she'd definitely take care of Bichuan Court if she had spare energy in the future. The 2 of them had their own thoughts as they buried themselves in replenishing the spirit stones. The operation of this Great Mountain Protecting Formation required a lot of spirit stones. These past few years, the formation had been in a half-useless state, so the spirit stones had long been taken away. Mo Qiange and Wei Haolan busied themselves for a long time before they finally replenished all the spirit stones. Before long, Wei Haolan activated the Great Mountain Protecting Formation. A loud buzzing sound came from inside the watchtower, and a white light shone, illuminating the entire watchtower in an instant. Following this sound, a layer of misty fog appeared above Bichuan Court. This fog became thicker and thicker, gradually forming a defensive barrier. Bichuan Court's great mountain protecting formation had been completely activated. Everyone inside the formation was under its protection. At the same time, it also closed all the entrances and exits. Upon seeing that the great formation had been activated, Wei Haolan said, "Elder Mo, let's go and help." Mo Chenga nodded. Aside from killing Ren Yufeng, there were too many things they needed to do. Although Xia Qing and Tang Shen were a lot stronger than they were 20 years ago, no one knew whether accidents would happen or not. The two of them stepped onto their respective flying magic weapons and flew towards the inner part of Bichuan Court. At that moment, Bichuan Court was already in chaos. The spiritual aura fluctuations were getting stronger and stronger. Presumably, the two elders were fighting desperately against Ren Yufeng. As for the so-called Divine Dragon Sect disciples gathered by Ren Yufeng, not all of them were Bichuan Court's original disciples. There were also some individual cultivators among them. Some of them were even covered in dead aura like Ren Yufeng, but they weren't as strong. Upon seeing this, Mo Chenga and Wei Haolan each took out the poison-resisting talismans they'd prepared. Their divine senses sensed Xia Qing and Tang Shen's positions. Then they flew over together. In the distance they saw Xia Qing and Tang Shen fighting against some people. There were 2 early-stage foundation-building disciples and a dozen or so aura-refining disciples. All of them were covered in dead aura, so they were presumably Ren Yufeng's disciples and grand disciples. Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, Senior Martial Sister Mo. Xia Qing shouted when she saw the two of them. She and Tang Shen had poison-resisting talismans, so these people couldn't do anything to them. However, they weren't good at fights of magical powers, so they couldn't take down these people in a short time. Both Mo Chenga and Wei Haolan attacked. Wei Haolan summoned her cold ice mirror, releasing one ice spell after another from it. Mo Chenga, on the other hand, raised her hand. She controlled the shuttle of flying Apsara as if it was her own arm, moving gracefully like a swimming dragon. All these years she studied Mo Yaoqing's notes inside the Dao Achieving Pagoda and learned a lot of fighting secrets, so her shuttle of flying Apsara was extremely sharp. Wherever the shuttle of flying Apsara went, corpses would fall one after another. The 2 foundation-building cultivators, on top of having to resist Wei Haolan's ice spell, also had to dodge the shuttle of flying Apsara, so they were flustered. Unfortunately, the 4 of them had poison-resisting talismans on them, so their dead aura couldn't break through them at all. Upon seeing this, Tang Shen and Xia Qing attacked the 2 cultivators with their magic tools without any hesitation. Before long they killed them on the spot. After withdrawing their magic tools, Xia Qing came over and said, "Senior Martial Sisters, how are you?" "I'm fine." Wei Haolan looked around. Aside from the dozen or so devil cultivators they killed, there was no one else. "Why isn't there anyone else? Did you deliver the message?" Xia Qing answered dejectedly, "This devil cultivator turned a lot of people into the same state as him. Their minds changed greatly and they simply wouldn't listen to our advice, so we had no choice but to kill them. There were also some people who were still rational but they were too weak, so we told them to hide first." Wei Haolan frowned. "Call them out. They're the clearest about the situation in the group now, so let them lead us to purge the devil cultivators." "All right." Soon they found the cultivators enslaved by Ren Yufeng. Among them were many former disciples of Bichuan Court, and when they saw Wei Haolan, many of them burst into tears. These people had been bullied by Ren Yufeng for 20 years. Now that they could finally take revenge, they were overjoyed, so they led the 4 of them everywhere to purge the devil cultivators assimilated by Ren Yufeng. The 4 of them, Xia Qing, Tang Shen, Wei Haolan and Mo Chenga, divided into 3 groups to purge the whole of Bichuan Court. The dead aura of these devil cultivators was far inferior to Ren Yufeng's, but they also had poison-resisting talismans on them. Soon, the devil cultivators scattered in Bichuan Court were completely purged. In the end, everyone shifted their gaze towards the center of Bichuan Court, the place where the conference hall was located. The sky above the hall was firmly covered by the great mountain protecting formation. Under the defensive cover, Ren Yufeng, who was covered in black aura, was confronting the 2 elders. Chapter 220. Ren Yufeng stared at the huge Bichuan Court under his feet. There were several hundred scattered cultivators standing inside, but none of them had dead aura. His face couldn't help but twist as he glared at the 2 elders in front of him. "Old women, you ruined my plan." Elder Qingyao stood with her whip in hand. Her face under her gauze hat was cold. "Devil cultivator, you're about to die, yet you still dare to be so arrogant." "About to die?" Ren Yufeng cast them a contemptuous glance, and a hostile look appeared on his face. "Even if I'm about to die, you'll still be my scapegoat." "Umph." Elder Qingyi stared at him coldly and lowered her hand that was covering her chest. "Since we can kill you, what's the big deal about us two old women dying? You killed my disciple and destroyed my Bishuan court. We martial sisters will properly settle this debt with you today." Ren Yufeng was arrogant. "Ah. That depends on whether you have the ability or not." Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao no longer said anything. The two of them glanced at each other, then began to cast spells. Their bodies emitted a bright red light that was as strong and gloomy as blood. The light became brighter and the color of blood also became more and more intense. Gradually, the light on their bodies fused together. Upon seeing this, Ren Yufeng didn't dare to be careless. He'd been fighting with the two elders for a while. He thought he could defeat them quickly with his divine technique, but in the end he was surprised to find that he was still at a disadvantage. Although his mind wasn't normal, he didn't become stupid. He immediately understood that the two elders must have cultivated some kind of secret technique in the Tao Achieving Pagoda, which was why their power could reach such a high level in just 20 years. Nevertheless, he didn't admit defeat. With the divine dragon's breath, he would soon advance to the nascent soul realm, then the deification realm, move unhindered in the human world, and ascend to become an immortal. What were these two old women? He could definitely kill them. With that thought in mind, the dead aura on Ren Yufeng's body surged, and his face under the black aura became increasingly ferocious. In an instant, the three of them moved. The two elders released their spiritual aura inside the red light, and Ren Yufeng's dead aura also surged towards them. The magic weapon the two elders refined for 4 years was called the Soul Restraining Whip. Ren Yufeng basically couldn't be considered a human anymore. He was as thin and withered as a skeleton. He basically didn't care about ordinary physical injuries, so they came up with this kind of magic weapon. This kind of magic weapon was specialized in attacking one's primordial spirit, so it was very difficult for Ren Yufeng to defend against it. His dead aura could protect his physical body, but it couldn't protect his primordial spirit. Just now he'd already suffered many losses. The two elders advanced and retreated, but they no longer attacked and defended like before. Instead, they completely gave up on defense and attacked with all their might. The fight in the air was intense, and the people watching from below couldn't take their eyes off it. The outcome of this battle concerned their future. Would they continue to be enslaved, or would they be able to live like humans? Of course he would choose the latter, but now was not the time for them to choose. They could only wait for the outcome of this battle. The red light and the black gas grew brighter and brighter until they could no longer see anything else. Many people were suffocated by the pressure. Wei Haolan glanced at them, then shouted, "Junior Martial Sister Xia, Junior Martial Brother Tang, take them to a place farther away." Most of these people only had aura refining cultivation level, so how could they withstand this kind of pressure? Xia Qing and Tang Xin obeyed. However, before they could move, they saw Ren Yufeng, who was in the sky, suddenly stop. As if he heard Wei Haolan's voice, he turned around and rushed down. The two elders immediately followed him, but Ren Yufeng's speed was extremely fast, so they couldn't stop him for a while. Wei Haolan was shocked to see Mo Chenga in that direction, so she shouted, "Elder Mo?" Mo Chenga could already feel the surging dead aura. Without saying anything, she took out another poison-resisting talisman and stuck it on her body. The white silk handkerchief was summoned, which instantly expanded to the size of a mat and floated towards Ren Yufeng. When Ren Yufeng saw her, a trace of hatred appeared on his face covered by the black gas. He actually didn't look at anyone else and rushed towards her. Mo Chenga hastily retreated. With the white silk handkerchief in front of her and her cloud-treading boots, she heard faint sounds of wind and thunder. In an instant, she disappeared from her original spot and reappeared several dozen feet behind Ren Yufeng. This was the teleportation technique engraved on the stone wall in Ziwei's Immortal's Cave. Wanderer Ziwei had perfected it, so foundation-building cultivators could also practice it. It was the only complete technique on the stone wall. In the past 20 years, Mo Chenga had been comprehending it for a long time, so she could finally use it. Ren Yufeng obviously hadn't seen it before, so he was stunned for a moment. Right at that moment, the two elders caught up to him. Their soul-confining whips attacked Ren Yufeng at the same time. Ah! Ren Yufeng couldn't concentrate and was hit head-on, causing him to scream miserably. After being hit, he turned around and glared fiercely at Mo Chenga. His dead aura surged. Nevertheless, the two elders didn't give him any time to rest. They used their secret technique at the same time. The soul-confining whips flashed with a blood-red light and struck him again. Ren Yufeng refused to accept his death. He gathered his dead aura and started to fight again. Emo Chinga quietly landed. When she saw that all the low-level cultivators around her had retreated, she heaved a sigh of relief. She signaled Wei Haolan, and the two of them also retreated a bit further. They were very clear about the cultivation levels of the two elders. They were already at the peak of the core formation realm. As for the dead aura on Ren Yufeng's body, it was obviously much denser than it was 20 years ago. This battle could be said to be the fiercest among cultivators below the nascent soul realm. It was no longer something cultivators at their level could meddle in. They couldn't even clearly see how the two sides fought. They could only see the dead aura and the red light entangling with each other, and the spiritual aura fluctuations were frighteningly strong. Emo Chinga couldn't help but recall the scene during Martial Uncle Xuanin's nascent soul ceremony. Martial Uncle Xingyang and her master joined hands to fight against Master Song Feng. Although their momentum wasn't as strong, the intensity of their fight was much higher. After all, nascent soul cultivators cherished their lives, but today they were fighting with their lives on the line. Look! Wei Haolan pointed at the sky. The three people who were fighting were emitting a bright red light, completely enveloping the black aura. Emo Chinga and Wei Haolan glanced at each other. Both of them were delighted. However, the black aura slowly spread and almost overwhelmed the red light. This battle was in a stalemate, causing Emo Chinga and Wei Haolan to tremble with fear. What if they lost? They didn't dare to think about the consequences. If they lost, the two elders would die, Bishuan Court wouldn't be able to be rebuilt, and they would experience another bloodbath. As she thought about this, Emo Chinga lowered her head to look at her hands. The dead aura on her body had already dissipated, so if the situation wasn't good, she could enter the virtual sky world to hide. However, they'd been in trouble together for 20 years, and she'd witnessed the two elders losing their lives. She didn't want this to be the end. Elder! Wei Haolan suddenly called out. Emo Chinga looked up and saw that the black aura in the sky was getting thicker and thicker, making her heart tighten. At the same time, she prepared herself. If the two elders really lost, she'd take Wei Haolan into the virtual sky world to hide for a while. However, just as the red light was being compressed to the point where there was almost no space for it to exist, it suddenly exploded. At the same time, they heard Elder Qingyi shout, "Die!" The red light was like blood. It sprayed forward and suddenly exploded the black aura. Ah! Ren Yufeng screamed. He couldn't control the black aura on his body anymore. Like ink dissolving into water, it slowly faded away. Puff, puff, puff. In midair, the three of them fell one after another. Their momentum dispersed, and their spiritual aura gradually dissipated. They no longer had the spiritual aura pressure of a peak-stage core formation cultivator. Emo Chinga and Wei Haolan watched for a while, but the three of them remained motionless. In the end, they couldn't help but run over. Elder! Elder! Wei Haolan rushed over. Her gauze hat fell off. Her withered face didn't have any luster. It was like a withered old tree, rough and dim. Elder Qingyi opened her eyes with difficulty and looked towards Ren Yufeng. When she saw that the black aura on his body had dissipated and he was motionless, she finally revealed a smile. She glanced at Elder Qingmiao, who was also speechless. Then both of them closed their eyes with smiles on their faces. Elder! Wei Haolan shouted loudly with grief in her eyes. Emo Chinga stared at Emo Chinga, then pressed her shoulder and shook her head at her. The two elders were beyond saving. How could Wei Haolan not know? She just found it hard to accept. Seeing her like this, Emo Chinga knew she needed time to accept, so she retreated and walked towards Ren Yufeng. Before she met Ren Yufeng, she never thought she'd be suppressed by a person to the point where she practically had no way out. A cultivator without any background and even without any talent actually made her spend 20 years with no way out. She mustn't look down on anyone. In this cultivation world full of variables, maybe an aura refining cultivator you look down on would be much stronger than you in the future. She heaved a long sigh, then picked up Ren Yufeng's Qingquan bag, then threw out a fire talisman, burning Ren Yufeng's corpse into ashes. She then raised her head to look at the dead aura that hadn't dispersed yet and frowned. This dead aura wouldn't disperse in a short time. Apparently, it would be a very long time before other people could set foot in this place. Xia Qing and Tang Xin ran over. When they saw the two elders' corpses, they were both dumbfounded. Elder! Wei Haolan stood up and calmly wiped the tears on her face. Elders done what they wanted to do. Now it's our turn. Senior Martial Sister, Junior Martial Sister Xia, collect the elders' corpses and send them to the Dao Achieving Pagoda. Junior Martial Brother Tang, regardless of whether they're Bishuan Court disciples or not, Tell everyone to gather at the monastery gate. Yes. Xia Qing and Tang Shen both stood up and did as Wei Haolan ordered. Elder Mo Wei Haolan looked at Mo Tiange. The two elders already passed away, so you're the only elder left in Bishuan court now. Please come with me to comfort the disciples. Alright, I'll naturally obey. Tang Shen moved very quickly. Within the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, all the cultivators in Bishuan court had already arrived at the monastery gate. Some people cheered jubilantly while some people were anxious and fearful. The ones cheering jubilantly were the former Bishuan court disciples who'd been tortured for the past 20 years and had finally waited for this day. The ones who were anxious and fearful were the individual cultivators accepted by Ren Yufeng. Almost all of them were male cultivators. When Bishuan court was still around, although they weren't bullied or humiliated, they didn't have the chance to stand out. At first, they were happy about Bishuan court's extermination, but later on, they discovered that having a cultivation group wasn't so wonderful. Wei Haolan's expression was cold. She was flying in the air, overlooking the numerous cultivators below her. She said, "Disciples, Bishuan court has gone through a calamity, but in the end, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao sacrificed their lives to eliminate our enemy. From today onwards, Bishuan court will be re-established, and all of you will return to the cultivation group." Before she could finish speaking, the Bishuan court disciples below her already started cheering. They'd been waiting for this day for too long. Wei Haolan raised her hand, silencing their voices. In addition, as the sect head of Bishuan court, I hereby announce that Bishuan court is no longer a cultivation group for female cultivators. Regardless of whether they're male or female, as long as they pass the test, they can become official disciples. This news instantly caused an uproar among the crowd. All the male cultivators who weren't Bishuan court disciples stared fixedly at Wei Haolan. Among them, the former Bishuan court foundation building female cultivators even cried out involuntarily, "Senior Martial Sister Sect Head." Wei Haolan merely glanced at them indifferently. "These are the two elders' final orders." She then turned towards the others. "For those who aren't Bishuan court disciples, we'll let bygones be bygones as long as they didn't bully us. 2 days later, Bishuan court will hold its reconstruction ceremony, and at the same time, we'll recruit new disciples." Chapter 221. Wei Haolan's announcement set off a storm in Linhai. As a cultivation group for female cultivators, Bishuan court had been in Linhai for several thousand years. Everyone had long been accustomed to it and accepted their fate. Now that they learned Bishuan court was going to recruit disciples, all the male cultivators in Linhai were delighted. Bishuan court's female cultivators, on the other hand, felt a bit lost because this also meant they wouldn't have any privileges anymore. Senior Martial Sister Sect Head. Someone came to the door that very night. Mo Tiange and Wei Haolan were discussing important matters when they heard the voice outside, causing them to glance at each other. There were 1,000 things waiting to be done. The main hall was temporarily sealed, so they were now in an ordinary room without any disciples guarding the door. Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't have any objections, Wei Haolan waved her hand to remove the soundproof barrier. "Come in." The person who entered was Senior Martial Sister Yang, who once fought with that unruly young Miss Hua Yilin out of jealousy. After Ren Yufeng was killed, Xia Qing brought the two elders' remains back to the Dao Achieving Pagoda to worship them. Afterward, everyone devoted themselves to rebuilding the group. The first thing they did was to recompile Bishuan court's disciple roster. According to the disciples who stayed here, when Ren Yufeng suddenly appeared that year, they were all caught off guard. Some died, some ran away, but half of them didn't have time to escape. Many of them suffered extreme torture before they managed to survive. Fortunately, Ren Yufeng was infected by the dead aura and gradually lost his mortal desires. Otherwise, who knew how many disciples in a cultivation group for female cultivators would have been humiliated. However, when he recruited disciples later, he accepted everyone regardless of who they were, and there were also some people with bad conduct. Upon hearing this, Wei Haolan showed no mercy. As long as they were identified, they would all be beheaded. Fortunately, this kind of thing wasn't common. Among the individual cultivators they recruited, only a few of them lost their humanity like Ren Yufeng. Most of the Bishuan court disciples just suffered a bit but didn't suffer any humiliation. On one hand, she rewarded them, on the other hand she displayed her might. Everyone, regardless of whether they were Bishuan court disciples or not, finally quieted down. Next, they had to deal with the specific matters of rebuilding the group. Senior Martial Sister Sect Head. After Senior Martial Sister Yang saluted, She didn't say anything and just stared at Mo Tiange. Wei Haolan said, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao already decided to invite this fellow Taoist Yi to become our Bichuan court's guest elder. If you have something to say, just say it, there's no need to hide it. Not revealing her real name was also Mo Tiange's request. Since she used the name Yi Xiaotian in Bichuan court, there was no need for her to keep changing it. Moreover, she hadn't reported this matter to her master yet, so it was better for her to keep a low profile. Wei Haolan didn't care about this matter, so she listened to her. Yes. Senior Marshal Sister Yang took a few more glances at Mo Tiange, then asked cautiously, Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head, do you think our Bichuan court will no longer be a cultivation group for female cultivators from now on? Will the offerings and whatnot be reduced? Wei Haolan could not help but frown as she said, You don't have to worry about this matter. Before the two elders left, they had already come to an agreement. Oh, I see. Senior Marshal Sister Yang let out a hollow laugh, then cast a glance at Mo Tiange. In that case, since the two elders have passed away, shouldn't we elect another elder? Of course. Wei Haolan didn't hide anything. We'll elect 2 temporary elders. The 2 elders and I will be responsible for the main matters. As for the future, according to our group's rules, once a disciple forms his or her gold core, he or she will automatically be promoted to an elder. Without waiting for Senior Marshal Sister Yang to ask again, Wei Haolan said bluntly, Junior Marshal Sister Yang, there are too many things to do now that the group is being rebuilt. I really don't have time to answer these questions. If you're free, can you go and help Junior Marshal Sister Xia and Junior Marshal Brother Tang? Okay. Since the sect head ordered her to do so, what else could she do? After Senior Marshal Sister Yang left, Wei Haolan angrily threw the new register on the table and said mockingly, I already said it wasn't difficult to recall the disciples, but it was very difficult to rebuild their self-esteem. Now, it seems I have to add another condition. It's even more difficult to make them set aside their selfishness for the time being. What kind of situation is this? The 2 elders have already passed away, but what kind of people are they saving? Mo Tiange tried to persuade her. No matter where you are, people like that are everywhere. Sect head, don't be too angry, the important matter is more important. Wei Haolan nodded. You're right. I just hate that they don't know what's important, it's really annoying. Then don't count on them. In any case, the 2 elders have already decided on these matters, so we just need to do as they say. When the 2 elders were mentioned, Wei Haolan was silent for a while. She then took a deep breath and pulled herself together. In 2 days we'll cremate the 2 elders first and offer them to the patriarch. In the future, whenever there's incense from the patriarch, the 2 elders will have a share. Mo Tiange didn't have any objections. This should be done. Without the 2 elders, the group can't be rebuilt. In addition, Elder Yi, Wei Haolan changed the way she addressed Mo Tiange. I've already asked Junior Marshal Sister Xia and Junior Marshal Brother Tang to pick some reliable people to be in charge of recruiting disciples, but just in case, I still need you to establish your prestige. Mo Tiange nodded. Bichuan court would no longer only recruit female disciples, so in the beginning, there would definitely be a mix of good and bad people, so it was necessary to intimidate them. As for the other matters, I have a lot of things to think about at the moment. Elder Yi, you've worked hard. Go and rest first, we still have a lot of things to do. Okay. Mo Tiange didn't refuse. She indeed wasn't good at school matters and she couldn't help Wei Haolan for the time being. It would be better for her to go back and adjust her condition. She would also be able to intimidate those who were dissatisfied with her. After leaving Wei Haolan's room, Mo Tiange randomly chose a room in the building, laid a defensive formation, then entered the virtual sky world, which she hadn't seen in a long time. Inside the virtual sky world, the bamboo shadows rustled and the wind blew gently. It was no different from 20 years ago. In the beginning she couldn't enter the virtual sky world, but later on she didn't have the chance to. These 20 years were both simple and complicated. Inside the Tao Achieving Pagoda, aside from healing and cultivating, there was nothing else to do. However, in order to defeat Ren Yufeng, they made countless plans, which almost exhausted them both physically and mentally. Now they were finally free. She dragged her exhausted body towards the small room. A golden dumpling ran out of the small room. As soon as it saw her, it pounced on her. Mo Tiange reached out to catch it, then stroked its head. Long time no see, Feifei. This Feifei, which was on the verge of making a realm breakthrough but had been left inside the virtual sky world for 20 years, was now finally in the 2nd rank. Its fur had also turned from white to golden. Feifei arched itself in her arms. Although they hadn't seen each other for 20 years, they had signed a contract, so Feifei didn't alienate her in the slightest. After returning to the small room, Mo Chenga put Feifei down. I'm really too tired. Can you go and play first? Feifei seemed to understand her words and became much more intelligent than before. It stared at her with its black eyes for a while, then jumped onto her shoulder and put its paw on her head. In an instant, a warm current flowed from Feifei's paw. Mo Chenga felt warm all over, and in an instant, all her fatigue disappeared without a trace. Feifei could make people forget their worries. So it was true. After an unknown amount of time, Mo Chenga finally woke up. All the fatigue in her body disappeared without a trace, whether it was physical or mental. Feifei squeaked, then jumped down from her shoulder and arched itself in her arms to please her. Mo Chenga smiled and stroked its head. Thank you. Having received her praise, Feifei happily rolled around in her arms. Holding Feifei in her arms, Mo Chenga took out a Chengkuan bag from inside her robe and pondered. This was Ren Yufeng's Chengkuan bag. She put it away, but because she had too many things to do, she forgot to give it to Wei Haolan. Now that she was looking at this Chengkuan bag, an idea came to her mind. She put her hand inside and fumbled for a while. Finally, she took out a heavy stone tablet. This was the stone tablet Ren Yufeng obtained from the ancient sacrificial temple, the one that recorded the so-called divine dragon secret technique. On the surface, this stone tablet didn't seem abnormal, and the drawings on it were also very simple. At the very front was a drawing of a dragon skeleton and a person casting a spell. At the back, there were also drawings of many human bodies in some postures. There were also some patterns drawn inside the human bodies, which seemed to be spiritual aura circulation methods. In addition, there were also some simple words carved on the side, but these ancient characters had long been lost, so she couldn't make out their meaning. Strange, there didn't seem to be anything abnormal. She couldn't help but reach out to touch it, but the moment she touched the surface of the stone tablet's patterns, her whole body went numb. Then, many strange thoughts were transmitted from the stone tablet to her body. Many scenes appeared in her mind, dragons flying in the sky, fighting, corpses. In the end, a person standing on top of a dragon skeleton, absorbing the divine dragon's breath. The strange thing was, what he absorbed was black aura, and the divine dragon's breath on the dragon skeleton was getting stronger and stronger. She heard the sound of woo-woo. Feifei suddenly jumped over and bit her finger. Mo Chenga felt pain on her fingertip. She came back to her senses from her meditation and broke out in a cold sweat. Sure enough, there was something wrong with this so-called divine dragon secret technique. It wasn't that the drawings were wrong, nor was it that her comprehension was wrong. This technique itself was a kind of evil technique. This stone tablet had a kind of wonderful power. As soon as she touched it, her mind would be completely attracted to it. If Feifei hadn't woken her up from her fantasy in time, the consequences would have been too horrible to contemplate. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga hugged Feifei, feeling extremely grateful. Fortunately, you saved me. Thank you so much. Feifei tilted its head and looked at her for a moment. It then jumped down and kicked the stone tablet away with its short hind legs. It then shook its head at her. This thing can't be touched? Mo Chenga guessed its meaning from her divine comprehension. Feifei whimpered twice, but it still approached her and put its hand on hers. That wonderful power appeared again, and very soon, Mo Chenga regained her calmness. All right, I understand. The existence of the contract made them trust each other, so Mo Chenga trusted Feifei without any hesitation. She ignored the stone tablet and continued to search Ren Yufeng's Chengkuan bag. There were still a lot of things inside. Spirit stones, materials, magic tools. There wasn't anything special. There were just a lot of spirit stones and good materials, but the magic tools were very ordinary. Right. After Ren Yufeng cultivated the evil technique, he never used magic tools. His dead aura was his best means of attack. As for these spirit stones and materials, he must have plundered them in Linhai all these years, right? Spirit stones aside, there were a lot of beast cores and materials unique to the Eastern Sea, so that should be the case. Mo Chenga thought about it and decided to return this Chengkuan bag to Wei Haolan. She didn't care about these materials and she didn't lack spirit stones, but for Bishuan Court, which had just been rebuilt, these were timely help. Chapter 222. In the past 2 days, the wandering Bishuan Court disciples came back one after another. What was gratifying was that most of the foundation building cultivators were still alive. But there were more troublesome matters ahead. First of all, many foundation-building cultivators objected to Bichuan Court's decision to no longer accept only female disciples. This tradition had been going on for several thousand years, so they were already used to it. Although Wei Haolan was quite famous, she was still a foundation-building cultivator. There weren't many foundation-building male cultivators in the group, and after the disaster, there were even fewer, so they didn't have much confidence in their words. Nevertheless, after this disaster, Wei Haolan's temperament was much stronger than it was 20 years ago. She forcefully suppressed all the opposing voices and expressed that this was the two elders' idea. In addition, there were also some people who were angry because the 6 of them hid in the Dao-achieving pagoda and abandoned everyone else. However, the two elders were the ones who made this decision, so they didn't dare to disrespect them, so they made things difficult for Wei Haolan. Mo Chenga made 2 moves, which made these people realize that although the core formation elders were gone, the new elders weren't to be trifled with. In the end, these people were finally convinced. 2 days later, Bichuan Court's reconstruction ceremony was held as scheduled. Early in the morning, Bichuan Court's gate was opened, and non-sect disciples poured in. After these individual cultivators were tested on their spiritual roots and cultivation levels, those who were allowed to join the group went to the square and lined up. Bichuan Court didn't have strict requirements for disciples. Even those with 5 spiritual roots could join as long as they weren't too weak and could only stay in the first or second layer of the aura refining realm their whole lives. Soon, the total number of Bichuan Court disciples exceeded 1,000, including the original disciples who returned. In the past 20 years, Ren Yufeng established the Divine Dragon sect. If there was anyone who didn't obey him, he would kill them to cultivate his dead aura. The cultivators in Linhai either died or fled, so there weren't many of them left. Being able to accept so many disciples was already very good. This was also the two elders' intention. First, Bichuan Court suffered heavy casualties, and there were only a few cultivators in Linhai. If they weren't willing to open their gate, Bichuan Court would weaken little by little until it couldn't be saved. Secondly, although Shengguan Yunhao's matter was caused by his own bad intentions, Bichuan Court's rules weren't without its drawbacks. If male cultivators could also obtain the same status as female cultivators, there would be a lot fewer inducements for male cultivators. After taking everything into consideration, it was inevitable that Bichuan Court would change the way they managed their group. If they remained stagnant, they'd only walk step by step towards death. From now on, Bichuan Court's transporting formation would be open to the public. As long as one could afford the transportation fee, everyone could use the transporting formation. In addition, the disciples of the sect had to go out and travel before they advanced to the next stage to increase their knowledge. These were all things the two elders explained to them one by one before they left the pagoda. These past few years, Wei Haolan and Mo Chenga had a lot of exchanges, so she learned a lot about Kunwu Cultivation Group's management methods. She already had a feeling about them, so she agreed to them one by one. As for the problem of brain drain, it was unnecessary to worry about it. Linhai lacked resources and Kunwu also didn't lack impoverished areas. However, although there weren't any big cultivation groups in those impoverished areas, there were still small and medium-sized cultivation groups, so they could still survive. Besides, the terrain of the Eastern Sea was special, so it was very difficult to obtain some beast cores and materials from the sea in Kunwu. If things went well, it might be a new source of income. In short, after experiencing the crisis of extermination, the two elders had already gotten over it. Wei Haolan also got over it. Bichuan Court would only be finished if they didn't communicate with the outside world. Mo Chenga sighed inwardly. In fact, Mo Yaoqing's original intention in establishing a cultivation group for female cultivators was good. However, as time went by, things often changed, so the people in power had to constantly adjust. Brilliant people in power had to understand the principle that things changed with the passage of time. Bichuan Court's set of rules had been in place for several thousand years, so it was time to change them. At noon, all the cultivators finished their tests. A new batch of disciples lined up in the square, waiting for the sect head's instructions. The eliminated cultivators, however, were reluctant to leave because they wanted to witness Bichuan Court's rarely seen event. Wei Haolan and the other foundation-building cultivators were all very cautious today. Their clothes were luxurious and their makeup was exquisite. Even Mo Chenga changed out of her Taoist robe and put on Bichuan Court's uniform to match the occasion. In any case, her identity today was Bichuan Court's guest elder, so she had to show her sincerity. They first paid their respects to the group's founder, then cremated the two elders' corpses and enshrined them in the ancestral temple. Moreover, their memorial tablets were placed on the same level as the only elder who advanced to the nascent soul realm aside from the founder, indicating that the two elders' contributions to Bichuan Court were no less than those of nascent soul cultivators. After the mourning was over, Wei Haolan announced a series of decisions. Disciples, Bichuan Court will be rebuilt today. From now on, male and female cultivators will be treated equally, there will no longer be any difference. New disciples will be divided into official disciples and part-time disciples. Part-time disciples who pass the test can become official disciples. Every 10 years, a group competition will be held. The winners will receive foundation building pills, which will no longer be decided by the elders of the group. Then there was the issue of treatment. During this great calamity, Bichuan Court suffered disastrous losses. None of our core formation elders survived. Before Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingyao passed away, they invited fellow Taoist Yi Xiaotian to become Bichuan Court's guest elder. From now on, every disciple of our group must respect her as if she were a core formation elder. At this point, Wei Haolan looked towards Emo Qianga. Emo Qianga took a few steps forward, then cupped her hands slightly, performing a half salute. Seeing as Emo Qianga didn't want to speak, Wei Haolan spoke again. Elder Ye's cultivation level is outstanding and she's very capable. She can be considered the #1 cultivator below the core formation realm. With her here, presumably, Bichuan Court can develop with peace of mind. As she said that, Wei Haolan's gaze swept over several restless foundation-building cultivators as a warning. Although Emo Qianga felt Wei Haolan's words were a bit exaggerated, she still calmly accepted it. In Bichuan Court, she indeed didn't fear any cultivators. Wei Haolan only said that to warn the restless disciples. Because all the core formation elders in our group have passed away, we've decided to choose 2 temporary elders among the foundation-building cultivators to take on the responsibilities of elders until a new core formation elder appears. Upon hearing what she said, more than 10 foundation-building cultivators all raised their heads and stared at her. They'd long heard about this matter. As elders, they had a lot more offerings compared to ordinary cultivators, so every single one of them wanted to be an elder, but they didn't know how to choose one. Wei Haolan's gaze was calm. She didn't immediately say, "Junior martial brothers and sisters, we'll discuss this matter in detail later." Soon after, she said some words of encouragement to the disciples before announcing the end of the ceremony. But the end of the ceremony was only the beginning of the bustling process. With so many new disciples, Immortals' caves had to be arranged. Most of Bichuan Court's original disciples were female cultivators, so they also had to be rearranged and separated from the male cultivators. Wei Haolan's feet didn't touch the ground during such a bustling process. Emo Qianga couldn't help with these matters and she also didn't like it, so she returned to the residence arranged for her to rest. She couldn't go to the Tao Achieving Pagoda for the time being. Although she even went to the most secretive 7th floor, that was, after all, an expedient move. She was only a guest elder and wasn't a real member of Bichuan Court, so there were still some matters she needed to avoid. Now that there were no core formation elders in the group, Wei Haolan also discussed with her about how to handle the Tao Achieving Pagoda. Bichuan Court had suffered disastrous losses. Aside from recruiting new disciples, the most important thing right now was to cultivate core formation cultivators again. Only with core formation cultivators would the group have some confidence. Wei Haolan's idea was to take advantage of the opportunity of selecting temporary elders to choose 5 foundation-building cultivators to live in the Tao Achieving Pagoda. She would then assign the 2nd to 6th floors to them and help them form their gold cores with all their might. The Tao Achieving Pagoda was full of spiritual aura. Not all of them could form their gold cores, but it was very possible for 1 or 2 of them to form their gold cores. Emo Qianga approved of this idea. However, this didn't have much to do with her. As long as Bichuan Court was on the right track, she could leave Linhai and return to Kunwu. She never expected that an ordinary experiential learning would take more than 20 years. She also didn't know how her acquaintances at Shenqing School were doing. Did they miss her and worry about her? All right. Before she left, Master asked for a drop of her blood essence so he should know she was fine. However, she hadn't returned yet. Did he come out to look for her? She was about to leave, but she couldn't calm down. She'd waited for 20 years, but at the last moment she couldn't sit still anymore. She wished she could give up everything and fly back to Shenqing School. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, a voice came from the door. Senior Yi, are you there? Emo Qianga frowned slightly. This voice. Right, it was Yi Lu's voice. She opened the formation and the door. Sure enough, she saw the 2 sisters standing outside. Senior Yi, it's really you. the two sisters called out in surprise. Chinga was also quite surprised and happy. She didn't expect they'd come back safe and sound. It's you? Quickly come in and sit. Lu and Ichio beamed with joy and nodded hurriedly. Upon entering the room, the two of them looked around then said, Senior, why is the room so messy? Should we tidy it up? Chinga couldn't help but laugh. We haven't seen each other for 20 years, yet you want to tidy up the room as soon as you see me? You're really fated to be mates. Your cultivation levels aren't bad, so you should be official disciples now, right? You don't have to help me with these things. Ichio was a bit embarrassed. We're used to it, Lu smiled. Senior, you're an elder of Bichuan Court now. Even if we're official disciples, we should still do some things for you. Right. Ichio promptly stood up. Senior, please take a seat. We'll talk to you while we tidy up. All right. Since they were so enthusiastic, she couldn't keep refusing them. Right back then, did you escape? Were you injured? The two sisters were silent for a while before Lu sighed and said, Back then, we were guarding the concocting room, so we were watching it from the beginning. Fortunately, Ichio and I didn't die, we were just seriously injured. Later, when the school was in chaos, us seriously injured disciples took advantage of our familiarity with the terrain to escape. And Ichio continued, Elder sister and I didn't dare to return to the school, so we hid on a small island in the sea. That island didn't have any spirit veins, so no cultivators came to it. It was very safe. Fortunately, we exchanged a lot of medicinal pills with Senior, so we hid on that island all these years to heal our injuries. You hid like that for 20 years? Lu smiled bitterly. We also came back once. At that time, the whole of Linhai was in chaos. Whether it was our group's disciples or individual cultivators, if they ran into that devil, they would most likely be tortured. During that time, all the cultivators in Linhai went into hiding. It was very difficult to see a single cultivator in Linhai town. Yes. Aside from some shameless cultivators who relied on that devil, we cultivators living in exile were unprecedentedly united. We kept each other informed so we could survive. This could also be considered a blessing in misfortune. Really? Chinga was a bit surprised. She originally thought those individual cultivators would dislike Bichuan Court cultivators because they attracted such a disaster. That's right. Ichio smiled and said, In fact, our Bichuan Court's reputation among individual cultivators wasn't very good before. However, in the past 20 years, because we had a common enemy and were in the same situation, we became a lot closer. This time, the sect had announced that he would abolish the school rules and treat male cultivators equally, so they were very happy. Now, our Bichuan Court's reputation has risen greatly, presumably will rise again very soon. Chapter 223. Chinga stayed in Bichuan Court for about a month. The matter of rebuilding the group progressed very smoothly. As Lu and Ichio said, Ren Yufeng's matter gave Bichuan Court a chance to be reborn. When she arrived in Linhai, Bichuan Court was on the decline. There were few people with spiritual roots, and even fewer people with high aptitudes. In addition, they only accepted female cultivators, so male cultivators had to pay a huge price to become official disciples of Bichuan Court. The unfair environment created fierce conflicts. Although Bichuan Court didn't bully others for no reason, as the only cultivation group in Linhai, it was inevitably overbearing. This kind of overbearingness was whitewashed under the surface of peace, but in fact, undercurrents were turbulent. Once there was a breakthrough, it would lead to a disaster. But no one expected Bichuan Court to suffer such a disaster. Its most outstanding disciple, who was also most likely to advance to the core formation realm, rebelled, 3 core formation elders all died, and the group was almost exterminated. The individual cultivators in Linhai were also unlucky. They also lived in fear, so they resolved their conflicts and stood together. In addition, after Bichuan Court was rebuilt, Wei Haolan announced the abolition of the group rule of only accepting female cultivators, which further promoted the change of Bichuan Court's image. From now on, Bichuan Court wasn't just a cultivation group for female cultivators, it was also a cultivation group in Linhai. As for the group itself, 2 temporary elders had been decided, and one of them was Tang Shen. This guy cultivated diligently for 20 years and made rapid progress. Coupled with the fact that there were no more talented people, he unexpectedly became the #1 expert in Bichuan Court. The weak young master who had a handsome face and was hostile to all male cultivators in the past was actually reborn. It was really surprising. This was also good for Chinga. Now that Tang Shen had grown up, Wei Haolan wouldn't be alone and helpless, so she could leave sooner. Thus, Mo Qingge bid farewell to Wei Haolan. Wei Haolan actually wanted to ask her to stay, but seeing that Mo Qingge was determined to leave and that she indeed stayed in Linhai for too long, she didn't say much. In the end, they went through trials and tribulations together, and now they were comrades in the same boat, so before leaving, Wei Haolan personally came to see her off. Elder Yi, these are the offerings for the elders in the group. After you leave, we might not see each other for several decades, so I'll give them to you this time. Seeing Wei Haolan's sincere smile, Mo Qingge took the Qinghuan bag and touched it. This amount was at least tens of thousands of spirit stones. For the cultivators of Linhai, it was a huge sum of money. Sect leader, the sect has just been rebuilt and spirit stones are of great use. 10,000 spirit stones is not a small amount. Is it okay to give it to me? Wei Haolan smiled and said, if it was a few days ago, I might have been reluctant. But now it doesn't matter. Mo Qingge was puzzled. Why is that? Wei Haolan deliberately didn't say it. Why don't you guess? Mo Qingge pondered for a moment. Could it be that you found some kind of treasure? That's right. Wei Haolan said with a smile. A few days ago, a disciple of the sect came to report that a spirit stone mine was discovered in the sea. It's not far from the sea and there aren't any high-level demonic beasts. It's completely possible to excavate it. Really? Mo Qingge was pleasantly surprised. This was really timely assistance. Congratulations, congratulations. Same to you, Wei Haolan said with a smile. Indeed, one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later on. Our Bichuan court didn't collapse during this calamity. Now we're experiencing one happy event after another. That being the case, I can leave with peace of mind. Wei Haolan seemed a bit reluctant to part with Mo Qingge. Elder Yi, I'm really a bit reluctant to see you leave. Mo Qingge smiled and said, whether you're willing or not, we'll meet again eventually. So you'll come back? Since I accepted the position of guest elder, I'll naturally come back to visit if I have time. Wei Haolan nodded then sighed. I know cultivators shouldn't be so persistent. Elder Yi is so magnanimous, so I'm sure you'll succeed in forming your gold core. Mo Qingge pursed her lips into a smile. Whether I succeed or not depends on the will of the heavens. She paused for a moment then said, when I return this time, I'll directly enter closed-door meditation until I form my gold core. I think even if we can meet again, it'll probably be several decades later. She was now in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and it would take her at least 10 or 20 years to reach the peak stage of the foundation building realm. If she failed to form her gold core a few more times. Although her aptitude wasn't the same as before, things like realm breakthroughs weren't foolproof. Wei Haolan asked, then what should we do if we want to find you? Can we go to Shenqing school? Mo Qingge thought for a moment then took out a jade talisman from inside her robe. This is a 10,000-mile sound-transmitting talisman. I sealed a strand of my divine sense inside it. If you need me for something urgent, just crush it. I'll immediately sense it and I'll rush over as fast as I can. She thought for a moment then said, if you want to find me, just go to Shenqing school and ask to see me. I'm a disciple of Lord Daoist Jinghe of Clear Spring Peak. My name is Mo Qingge. Wei Haolan took the sound-transmitting talisman and thought for a moment. Elder Yi, you said you were a disciple of Lord Daoist Shenin? I didn't remember wrong, right? Mo Qingge had no choice but to apologize. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you the truth. In fact, my master is Lord Daoist Jinghe, and Lord Daoist Shenin is my master's first disciple. Before I built my foundation, I was always taught by this senior martial brother of mine. I see. Wei Haolan sighed. Your senior martial brother is also a nascent soul cultivator. It seems your master is quite amazing. My master is very good. When she thought of Lord Daoist Jinghe, a faint smile appeared on her face. It had been more than 20 years since they last met. She really missed that unreliable master of hers. Although he was always disrespectful, always did some ridiculous things, had an eccentric temper, and was as fickle as a child, he always treated her sincerely. The two of them chatted for a while before they finally went to the transporting formation. Wei Haolan led Mo Qingge through many twists and turns before they finally arrived at an inconspicuous small building. This small building was obviously dilapidated, but there were intact formations outside. Wei Haolan spent some effort to open these restrictions. Mo Qingge was amazed. Sect head, is the transporting formation here? She heard the transporting formation leading to the outside was very mysterious. In the past 20 years, Ren Yufeng also wanted to use this formation to go to the outside world, but he never found it. It was actually in this ordinary small building? Wei Haolan smiled and said, "You didn't expect this, did you? In fact, we didn't go this way. There's a tunnel leading to this place in the main hall of the conference hall. If there are disciples going out, they'll use that tunnel. We only send a group of disciples out every few years, and they're all our trusted disciples, so the secret is well protected." Emo Chenga nodded. She looked around, but in her heart, she recalled Yen Ruoshu and the others she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave. When she first met them, she never expected she would have this kind of entanglement with Bishuan Court. She also never expected she would become Bishuan Court's guest elder. It just so happened that Bishuan Court went through a catastrophe in the past 20 years. Too many disciples went missing, so no one asked about their whereabouts. However, she didn't need to worry about this matter. In any case, the deaths of Yen Ruoshu and the others had nothing to do with her. Sect Head Elder Yi. After entering the small building, they followed the stone steps to the underground. The disciple guarding the tunnel bowed to them. Wei Haolan nodded, then led Emo Chenga to the innermost room. This was an extremely complicated star atlas formation. There were specks of light on it, which coincided with some kind of astrology. Upon closer inspection, there were some special differences. Upon seeing Emo Chenga's gaze, Wei Haolan said, "Demonic Mountain has strange restrictions, so ordinary transporting formations can't send people there. I heard from the elders that this transporting formation is a kind of ancient transporting formation. I don't know where the patriarch found it. So that's how it is." Mo Yaoqing's attainments and formations were indeed quite outstanding. Unfortunately, there weren't many records in her notebook. Elder Yi. Wei Haolan didn't immediately send Mo Chenga into the transporting formation. She frowned slightly, but in the end she couldn't help but laugh. "Even if you escort a gentleman for 1,000 miles, you'll have to part in the end. I'm being naggy again." Mo Chenga also laughed. After getting along with Wei Haolan for 20 years, Mo Chenga really liked her temperament. She was decisive, valued benefits, liked to weigh the pros and cons, and was ruthless, but she was also heroic and straightforward. No one was perfect. Among cultivators, it was really not easy to meet such a woman. Wei Haolan pondered for a while, then said, "In these 2 years, how about I hide your whereabouts and just say you're in closed-door meditation? Although Junior Marshal Brother Tang's not bad now, he's still a bit too inexperienced." Mo Chenga nodded subconsciously, but when she regained her composure she smiled and said, "Sect Head, why do your words sound so awkward to me? Junior Marshal Brother Tang's a bit older than me." "Age doesn't matter in cultivation." Wei Haolan smiled. "Although you're young, you're very mature. This is something Junior Marshal Brother Tang can never catch up to." What she said made Mo Chenga want to reflect on herself. "Although I'm young, I'm very mature." What she said, "Doesn't that mean my mentality is much older than my actual age?" To women, this kind of saying always made them feel like they were aging prematurely. Although, as a cultivator, it's better to be a bit mature. When Mo Chenga finally finished speaking, she stepped into the transporting formation. Wei Haolan personally laid down spirit stones. "I'll take my leave first." Wei Haolan smiled. "We'll meet again, Elder Yi." "Oh no, I prefer to call you fellow Taoist Yi." Mo Chenga cupped her hands. The transporting formation shone brightly. At the last moment, Mo Chenga suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly took something out of her Chengkuan bag and threw it out. "Sect Head, this is..." Before she could finish speaking, she already disappeared into the transporting formation. Wei Haolan was flabbergasted. She picked up the small box on the ground and opened it. Inside were rows of neatly arranged jade bottles. She took out a jade bottle and pulled out the cork. A pleasantly surprised expression flitted across her face. She hastily opened the second jade bottle, then the third. The pleasantly surprised expression on her face became more and more intense. In the end, Wei Haolan hugged the box tightly. She stared at the now empty transporting formation and said, "Elder Yi, thank you." The first bottle contained foundation-building pills. The second bottle contained soul-strengthening pills. The third bottle was the same. These medicinal pills were enough to cultivate a group of foundation-building cultivators. They could even support a foundation-building cultivator all the way to the peak stage of the foundation-building realm. In the end, this Elder Yi didn't accept Bishuan Court's offerings for nothing. When the light from the transporting formation dissipated, Mo Chenga was already standing on Kunwa's land. She softly sniffed the rich spiritual aura in the air, then looked at the stretch of high mountains in the distance. "Kunwa, it's indeed Kunwa. I'm finally back." Before she could calm her excitement, A ray of light appeared in the distant sky. This ray of light was getting closer and closer, brighter and brighter. It was actually a glowing feather. Emo Chenga reached out her hand. The feather fell into her palm and turned into a talisman. This was Xinqing School's summoning talisman. Chapter 224. School summoning talismans were mainly divided into two types. One was the disciple summoning talisman, which was used to communicate with fellow disciples. Once this talisman was sent out, all the disciples within a certain range would receive it. Disciples who were away from home could receive several before leaving the mountain. The other type was the master summoning talisman. Once this talisman was sent out, as long as one had a Xinqing School identity tablet, they could receive it no matter where they were in the celestial pole. However, this talisman was very difficult to make, and it required a lot of people, so generally speaking it wouldn't be used casually. The first talisman Emo Chenga received was the master summoning talisman. It had been 22 years since she left Mount Taikong, but as soon as she set foot on Kunwa's land, she actually received the master summoning talisman. Emo Chenga frowned slightly and unfolded the talisman. Xinqing School disciples, listen to my order. All disciples in the Foundation Building realm and above, regardless of whether they have errands or not, are to put down whatever they're doing and return to Mount Taikong before the 6th day of the 6th month. There was only such a simple command and no reason was mentioned at all, causing Emo Chenga to be dumbfounded. Xinqing School had more than 200 Foundation Building disciples in total. Although many of them died in the demonic beast riot several decades ago, it had been more than 30 years, so they should have almost recovered. In addition to the Foundation Building disciples who managed the shops and were ordered to run errands outside, there must be about 300 disciples in total. Why did they summon so many disciples back to the mountain? Moreover, many of Xinqing School's important industries were managed by Foundation Building cultivators outside. If they were all summoned back, a lot of things would come to a standstill. Was this matter that serious? Emo Chenga shook her head and flicked her fingers, igniting the talisman in her hand. A spiritual light was emitted from the burnt talisman and flew towards the sky. This was the reply from the master summoning talisman. At the same time, a similar spiritual light streaked across the sky. Emo Chenga smiled when she saw it. Seems like a fellow disciple is also here. That's good. She soared up and flew towards the place where the spiritual light came from. Before long, her divine sense sensed someone flying towards her. As soon as their divine senses came into contact, they quickly flew towards each other. The person was indeed a Xinqing School disciple. When he saw her from afar, he saluted. Senior Martial Sister. It was a young man in the early stage of the Foundation Building realm. Although he called her Senior Martial Sister, his expression and tone were a bit arrogant. Looking at this person's appearance, he was no more than 17 or 18 years old, so he must be very young. A young talent would always be a little arrogant, but this was nothing. With a faint smile on her face, Emo Chenga also raised her hand to return his salute. Junior Martial Brother, greetings. The two met in the air and stood still, sizing each other up. The young man realized that she was still a young girl, but he didn't take it to heart. Among the female cultivators of the large sects, there were many who cultivated youth-retaining techniques. Even if they couldn't maintain their youthful looks, they could still afford to buy look-preserving pills. This senior sister has also received a message from the sect and is returning to the sect? The young man asked. Of Emo. The youth smiled and said, in that case, how about we travel together? Emo fellow Emo Su's sect, Emo and Emo Masters Su. Emo. As they set off on their journey back, the young man introduced himself. My surname is Lan, and my name is a single character, Ling. I'm a disciple of Sweet Dew Peak. May I know senior's name? Lan Ling? The corners of Emo Chenga's mouth couldn't help but curve upwards. With such a girly name, it was no wonder he had to emphasize that it was the Ling from Chioling. My name is Emo Chenga, a disciple of Clear Spring Peak. Oh, so it's senior sister from Clear Spring Peak. The young man tilted his head and looked at her again. Senior Martial Sister, are you here to travel or to handle some matters? Traveling. Emo Chenga gave him a simple explanation, then asked, Junior Martial Brother Lan, what's this place? Astonishment flashed in Lan Ling's eyes. Senior Martial Sister Emo is here, but you actually don't know where this place is? Emo Chenga shook her head softly. I came here through a transporting formation, but I haven't had time to ask around. Oh, I see, Lan Ling said. This is the southeast of Kunwu, not far from Tiandao sect. Upon hearing this answer, Mo Chenga was dumbfounded. So it's here. What's going on here? Lan Ling was curious. Wasn't this place near Yunwu's sect? However, she didn't have the time nor was she in the mood to return to Yunwu's sect, so she only said faintly, I've been here before. Oh. Lan Ling nodded then didn't say anything else. He could see that Mo Chenga wasn't a talkative person, and he himself was quite arrogant. Even if she was a senior martial sister in the late stage of the foundation building realm, he still disdained flattering her. Mo Chenga was happy to see this, so the two of them focused on hurrying on their journey. They were now in the southeast of Kunwu, and Shenqing School happened to be in the west of Kunwu. On their way back they met some fellow disciples one after another. 2 became 3, 3 became 4, and finally the number of people traveling with them reached 8. There were so many people, and among them there were some who liked to talk, so they started to chatter all the way. Mo Chenga hadn't been back for more than 20 years, so she didn't know so many things happened in the school, so she listened with great interest. For example, Grandmaster Xingyang and Grandmaster Lingshu wanted to betroth their favorite disciples, Martial Uncle Bai and Martial Uncle Jiang. However, when Martial Uncle Bai found out about this, he disliked Martial Uncle Jiang for being unruly and refused to agree. When Martial Uncle Jiang heard about this, the whole world was turned upside down. The Martial Uncle Bai and Martial Uncle Jiang they were talking about should be Junior Martial Sister Jiang, the disciple of Bai Yanfei and Lord Taoist Lingshu. Mo Chenga had heard about Junior Martial Sister Jiang before. She was Martial Uncle Lingshu's blood-related descendant and was doted on since she was a child, so she was unruly and willful. In Drifting Cloud Peak she was like a little overlord. Even in other peaks, no one dared to say anything about her. Someone asked, this Martial Uncle Jiang is still young. Our Shenqing school doesn't focus on lust between men and women. Even for dual cultivation, we usually only consider it after we reach the core formation realm, right? Why do you want to betroth them now? The person who spoke was an old man. Although this old man was quite old and his hair was already white, he was very talkative. Mo Chenga didn't know where he heard this rumor, but these days he was always gossiping with others. Now he said with a smile, Junior Martial brother, don't forget how old Grandmaster Lingshu is. He's about to pass away. Mo Chenga nodded secretly when she heard what he said. That's right. This Grandmaster Lingshu's lifespan is almost up, so he's anxious to find a backer for his beloved descendant, right? Unfortunately, Junior Martial Sister Jiang is too unruly. I'm afraid she'll let him down. Oh, so that's how it is. The previous person understood. Grandmaster Lingshu looks very spirited, but he's actually about to pass away. The old man stroked his beard and narrowed his eyes. In any case, Grandmaster Lingshu is a nascent soul cultivator. As long as he doesn't pass away, his cultivation level is solid. Unfortunately, once Grandmaster Lingshu passes away, the number of nascent soul cultivators in our Shenqing school will be reduced to 5 again. Someone else interrupted. What's wrong with that? Several of our martial uncles are already in the late stage of the core formation realm. They'll soon be able to advance to the nascent soul realm, right? As he spoke, he counted with his fingers. Martial Uncle Danning of Drifting Cloud Peak, Martial Uncle Yuanin of Soul's Retreat Peak, Martial Uncle Shoujing of Clear Spring Peak, and Martial Uncle Lingxi of Sweet Dew Peak. These martial uncles are all in the late stage of the core formation realm. Ah. The old man raised his head and laughed. You guys, how long ago was this news? Let me tell you, Martial Uncle Danning and Martial Uncle Shoujing are already in the peak stage of the core formation realm. They'll be forming their nascent souls soon. Upon hearing what he said, several people in the same group looked towards the old man. Even Lan Ling, who disdained to talk to him, and Mo Chenga, who had been quietly listening, also cast their gazes on him. Cultivators forming their nascent souls was a major event for cultivation groups. Not to mention small and medium-sized cultivation groups, even large cultivation groups like theirs would strengthen their vigilance and activate the Great Mountain Protecting Formation once a cultivator was ready to form his or her nascent soul. They would be in a half-sealed state to prevent people from causing trouble. Having so many people paying attention to him all of a sudden, the old man's gossipy heart was satisfied. You guys don't know? An impatient person urged. We've either been traveling outside for several years or we're usually so busy that we don't even know. Senior Martial Brother Yen, quickly tell us. The old man was very proud of himself. Alright, I'll tell you. Based on our current situation at Shenqing School, Grandmaster Lingshu's lifespan is said to only have about 10 years left, so he's in a hurry to marry Martial Uncle Jiang to a young junior like Martial Uncle Bai who has a backer and a bright future. That way, even if he passes away, he won't have to worry about Martial Uncle Jiang causing any trouble. Senior Martial Brother Yen, get to the point, someone urged impatiently. Although Martial Uncle Jiang's matter also sounded very interesting, it was nothing compared to someone forming their nascent soul in the school. Young people are really impatient. The old man glared at that person, then continued to speak, neither too fast nor too slow. A nascent soul cultivator passing away has a profound impact on the school, especially after Grandmaster Xianyin formed his nascent soul, which greatly improved Xianqing School's strength. At this time, our Grandmasters naturally don't want to just watch Grandmaster Lingshu pass away. But how can they stop something like passing away? Longevity pills aren't that easy to obtain. This old man was really long-winded. Listening to him, Mo Chenga really wanted to grab his collar and shake him hard to shake off all his nonsense. She definitely wasn't the only one with this idea, but this old man wasn't threatened at all. In the end, they were from the same school and they couldn't do such a thing, so she had no choice but to let him continue to be noisy. After a long time, he finally got to the actual content. Since that's the case, there's no other way. Grandmaster Lingshu can't hold on for more than a few years, so we can only let the core formation martial uncles who have hopes of forming their nascent souls speed up their cultivation. In addition to Martial Uncle Danning, Martial Uncle Shoujing, Martial Uncle Yuanin, and Martial Uncle Lingxi only advanced to the late stage in the last 50 years. This is all because of the support of nascent soul grandmasters. Then he talked about several hundred words of nonsense before he got to the main point. It hasn't been long since Martial Uncle Yuanin and Martial Uncle Lingxi advanced to the late stage, and it'll be a while before they can form their nascent souls. Martial Uncle Danning stayed in the late stage for 100 years and finally reached the peak stage of the core formation realm 2 years ago. As for Martial Uncle Shoujing, he just reached the peak stage of the core formation realm not long ago. Martial Uncle Shoujing had been in seclusion for 35 years. Ever since he returned from the demonic beast riot 35 years ago, he had been in seclusion. Martial Uncle Shoujing's talent really can't be underestimated. Among the few of us, I'm afraid there are some people with better spiritual roots than him, but we're still struggling in the foundation establishment realm. Not only has he formed his gold core, he's going to form his nascent soul very soon. Senior Brother Yen. Someone couldn't help but say, we all know about Martial Uncle Shoujing. There's no need to keep talking about it, right? The other 7 people all had the same expression, so Senior Martial Brother Yen could only shut his mouth. Fine. In any case, you know Martial Uncle Shoujing and Martial Uncle Danning are already in the peak stage of the core formation realm and can form their nascent souls. That's it. The 7 of them were speechless. Under the gazes of the 7 people, the old man surnamed Yen cried out in grievance, you wanted it to be concise, so that's it. After a moment of silence, someone else asked, can Martial Uncle Danning and Martial Uncle Shoujing successfully form their nascent souls? Who knows? Senior Martial Brother Yen quickly chimed in, forming the nascent soul. It's not like building one's foundation. As long as one's aptitude isn't too bad, one can always take foundation building pills and eventually succeed. Forming one's nascent soul can only depend on the will of the heavens. It doesn't have much to do with aptitude. That was true. Building one's foundation was the first threshold of cultivation. Although most cultivators stayed in the aura refining realm their whole lives, for disciples of cultivation groups like them, as long as they were a bit serious and had a bit of luck, the possibility of them building their foundation was still quite high. But when it came to forming one's nascent soul, there were too many examples that proved the will of the heavens was unpredictable. Chapter 225. When Mo Chinga mentioned nascent soul, several foundation-building cultivators chatted all the way back to Mount Taikang. Even their initial fear of the school's mishap had faded. In fact, aside from encountering fellow disciples, there was nothing unusual along the way. If something happened to Xianqing School, the whole of Kunwu wouldn't be so peaceful. Mo Chinga heard a lot of news on the way. Now, at least she knew her master was safe and her senior martial brother Shoujing was going to advance to the nascent soul realm soon. Thinking of this, she remained silent, unable to describe her feelings. She was about to form her gold core, but he was about to form his nascent soul. The distance was always so far, nevertheless she would never be impatient for this matter. After so many years, she firmly remembered her master's teachings. She was now a genius, so she didn't have to worry about failing to advance to the next realm because of her lifespan. Martial Uncle Xianyin, even if he was extremely talented, he just needed to walk steadily step by step. Melancholy flashed across her heart, but she quickly controlled it. Compared to the great Tao of immortality, a slight change in her heart was really nothing. Besides, that kind of acquaintance would always leave a knot in her heart. That being the case, why should she insist on something that was originally imperfect? After traveling day and night, they finally arrived at Mount Taikang after a month. Under their feet was a majestic mountain range, a sea of clouds, spiritual aura and immortal aura. The main peak was thousands of feet high, surrounded by 6 slightly shorter peaks that looked like a blooming lotus. Countless roof tiles and eaves were hidden in the forest, and disciples in white and blue robes came and went. After leaving for more than 20 years, she finally came back. Emo Chinga looked at everything under her feet with nostalgia. Crossing tens of thousands of miles from the eastern territory of Kunwu reminded her of when she hadn't built her foundation yet. It took her no less than 2 months to travel from Yunwu sect to Xianqing school. That person looked cold but was very considerate. He knew her cultivation level was too low and she couldn't stand traveling day and night, so, senior martial brothers and sisters. The patrolling cultivators came and saluted them. You must be tired from the journey. Please go back to your caves and rest. Among them, the old man surnamed Yen was very gossipy. He hurriedly pulled the leading foundation building cultivator and asked, Senior martial brother, may I ask why the school called us back? The leading cultivator shook his head and said, The grandmasters of the various peaks will explain this to you in detail, it's not my place to comment. Sorry everyone, please go back first. The other party's refusal was so obvious that the old man had no choice but to follow the crowd into the protective mountain formation and return to their respective peaks. Emo Chinga stopped in midair for a moment. She raised her head to look at the semi-defensive Great Mountain protecting formation, then lowered her head to look at Mount Taikang, which didn't seem to have changed at all from more than 20 years ago. While descending towards Clear Spring Peak, she pondered in her heart that this was indeed what old man Yen said. Someone was about to attempt to form their nascent soul. However, even if there were cultivators in the school who were trying to form their nascent souls, they wouldn't summon all the foundation building cultivators back. When Martial Uncle Shenin formed his nascent soul back then, the school was only slightly more heavily guarded. Since she couldn't think of a reason, she shook her head and threw these thoughts to the back of her mind. In any case, she was already back. Wouldn't she just have to ask? Her uncouth master was the Grand Master of Clear Spring Peak. Even if other people didn't know the inside story, she would know. While he was lost in his thoughts, he had already landed. She raised her head to look around. The scenery and buildings around her hadn't changed at all. It was just that the cultivators coming and going didn't recognize her. Back then, she was tossed around by her master and spent several months in Mingxua Hall. She also often went to the main peak to give sermons, so most of the aura-refining disciples in the school recognized her. Especially after she took over Shanqing Palace's affairs, everyone in Clear Spring Peak respectfully addressed her as Grandmaster Emo, or Martial Uncle Emo, but now, as she walked on Clear Spring Peak, the disciples coming and going only curiously sized her up. When they saw her passing by, they simply stood to the side to make way for her and even lowered their heads to show their respect to a foundation-building senior. Only a few older aura-refining cultivators called out, Grandmaster Emo, in astonishment, but they attracted the astonished gazes of the younger cultivators. Emo Chinga showed a faint smile, then raised her head to look at the sky of Clear Spring Peak. It had been 22 years. The new generation had replaced the old. These young disciples who had just entered the school and were still busy on Clear Spring Peak didn't recognize her at all. As for those disciples who recognized her, if they hadn't already advanced to the foundation-building realm in the past 22 years, they probably would have also sensed the passage of time and wholeheartedly cultivated, right? For high-level cultivators, the short span of 22 years was the best time for aura-refining cultivators. Senior martial sister? Just as she was about to enter Shanqing Palace, she was stopped by a disciple guarding the gate. He sized her up from head to toe, his eyes filled with doubt. Senior martial sister, this is Grandmaster Jingha's Immortal's Cave. You can't enter without being summoned. Emo Chinga was stunned, but she couldn't help but laugh. As it turned out, it wasn't just aura-refining cultivators. Even these foundation-building cultivators didn't recognize her. Her laughter made the disciple guarding the gate unhappy. He said with a straight face, Senior martial sister, Grandmaster has a bad temper. Please leave quickly. Emo Chinga waved her hand. Just as she was about to say something, she heard someone calling out in bewilderment, Martial Uncle Emo? She turned around. It was Mingxia, who often served Lord Daoist Jingha and was quite fond of him. Emo Chinga smiled. Mingxia, long time no see. However, Mingxia was startled by her friendly greeting. Back in Shanqing Palace, because these maids were arrogant because they relied on their grandmaster and because Qin, Qi, Shu and Hua schemed against her, Mo Chenga always treated the 16 of them harshly. If she was angry she would scold them. Later on, these maids all behaved themselves, but she was too lazy to pay attention to them. She rarely smiled at them. After 22 years of not seeing each other, Mingxia suddenly saw her smiling face and her voice was so gentle and pleasant. This person was really fake, right? However, Mingxia didn't know that Mo Chenga had been outside for a long time, experienced a lot, and her horizons were broadened. She naturally didn't care about these little grudges from the past. Besides, she hadn't returned for a long time. Now that she saw every blade of grass and every tree in Shenqing School, she was happy, let alone her old acquaintances. What? You don't recognize me? Mingxia examined Mo Chenga up and down before she finally confirmed her identity. A smile appeared on her face. Martial Uncle Mo, you're finally back. Grandmaster was just wondering why you didn't send a message back for more than 20 years. Mo Chenga showed a faint smile, but before she could answer, she saw the disciple guarding the door looking at her with astonishment. Martial Uncle Mo? Exactly, Mingxia said to the disciple. This is our grandmaster's last disciple, Martial Uncle Mo. Martial Uncle Mo hasn't returned for more than 20 years, but you actually stopped her outside. The disciple scratched his head. Although he was embarrassed, he didn't panic. Instead, he respectfully saluted her. Martial Uncle Mo, please forgive me. I've never seen you before, so I didn't recognize you. Please don't blame me. This disciple's words were appropriate. Besides, Mo Chenga wasn't angry, so she naturally wouldn't argue with him. She smiled and said, "It's nothing. Can I go in now?" The disciple promptly nodded and stepped aside. Mo Chenga dusted off her sleeves, then slowly walked into Shanqing Palace, which she hadn't seen for more than 20 years. Girl, you're finally willing to come back. Her clown master was still half lying on his dragon throne. His face wasn't drooping and there were no wrinkles on the corners of his eyes. He was still handsome, graceful, noble and lazy. Right now he was lazily flipping through a book and didn't even bat an eyelid. Look, even the gatekeeper doesn't recognize you. Mo Chenga couldn't help but smile at this familiar scene. She brushed her sleeves and knelt down softly. Disciple hasn't returned for more than 20 years, making Master worried. Master, please punish me. Cough cough. Lord Taoist Jinghe swallowed the unchewed plum in his mouth along with the core. He choked so much that his eyes rolled back. Mingxia promptly ran to the front to drink the tea. Grandmaster. After a long time, Lord Taoist Jinghe finally calmed down. He returned the tea to Mingxia, sat up and glared at Mo Chenga. Damn girl, do you want to choke your master to death? She was still smiling, but her eyes widened innocently. Disciple didn't do anything. I even greeted master politely. You? After being choked by the plum, Lord Taoist Jinghe was choked again by this sentence, so he could only glare at her angrily. But after glaring for a while, the expression on his face changed into one of joy. Not bad. Not only did you make a realm breakthrough, but your realm is also very stable. And you didn't leave for nothing these past 20 years. Come here, let master take a look. He waved at her cheerfully. Mo Chenga stood up and walked towards him. Lord Taoist Jinghe grabbed her wrist and probed her meridians with his spiritual aura. After a while, good, that's right. He quickly examined her body, then let go of her wrist. He picked up a plum and threw it to her. You're obedient. Master rewarded this to you. Mo Chenga caught the plum, which seemed to have only a little bit of spiritual aura. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Master, as your beloved disciple, I left for more than 20 years and finally came back with great difficulty. Why didn't you ask me anything? Lord Taoist Jinghe picked up another plum and nibbled on it. He said disapprovingly, beloved disciple? Do I have such a thing? He looked her up and down with disgust. You can run and jump and you're in a good mood after making a realm breakthrough. Do I need to ask you anything? Ask me how I've been in the past 20 years and what I've experienced. As a master, shouldn't you analyze the situation for your disciple? What kind of master was this? She hadn't been back for 20 years. Now that she finally came back from her travels, he gave her a plum as a reward? He didn't even ask her anything. Back then, when she was a nominal disciple of Martial Uncle Shenin, he wasn't like this. There was no need to mention second uncle. Whenever she encountered something, second uncle would analyze the situation for her, Tell her what lessons she should learn and how to deal with it next time. Lord Dawish Jinghe rolled his eyes. What kind of person am I? I can tell you're very well just by touching your meridians. As for what you've experienced, that's for you to understand yourself. What's the use of telling you? You're not a child. Mo Chinga was stunned, but she soon smiled happily. Yes, she was different now. She wasn't a little cultivator in the aura refining realm who needed someone to help her walk, and her master wasn't second uncle or martial uncle Xianin. He had his own way of caring and teaching, so why did he need to insist on the same? All right then. Mo Chinga moved a chair and sat in front of him. Since master has nothing to say, disciple has a lot of things to ask. Chapter 226. Alas, why did I accept you as my disciple? Lord Dawish Jinghe looked at her and shook his head with a sigh. I, Qin Jinghe, have been wise all my life, but, master. Mo Chinga glared at him. I just want to ask you something. Do you have to be like this? Alas, you're not filial. You actually talk to master like this, master. If she didn't say anything, he wouldn't stop sighing. Lord Dawish Jinghe glanced at her. Upon seeing her furious expression, he chuckled and said, Chinga, master thinks this is more like you. Look at you suddenly kneeling and begging for punishment. Master's heart feels creeped out. Mo Chinga said everything she wanted to say. What kind of master was this? In other words, if she wasn't fierce, this master would feel his bones were light and he would feel uncomfortable all over? Enough. She said with a straight face. Master, was everything okay when I wasn't here? What about Jinji? Has he built his foundation? Oh, it's good, it's all good. I didn't let anyone touch your little cave abode. Jinji built his foundation 4 years after you left. He's doing very well now. Mo Chinga felt a bit relieved when she heard Jinji had built his foundation. Although she secretly left some foundation-building pills for him, Jinji's spiritual roots were poor after all, so it was hard to say whether he could build his foundation or not. 22 years had passed, so Jinji should be in his 40s now. If he still hadn't built his foundation, it would be troublesome. Some cultivators didn't fail to build their foundation only because they were old. Usually, it was because they failed for a long time that their mental state became unstable, so they gradually got further and further away from building their foundation. Master, you've been teaching him all these years, right? Huh? Teaching him? I don't have that kind of thought. Lord Dawish Jinghe waved the book in his hand indifferently. Mo Chinga wrinkled her brows. Don't tell me you want Jinji to perish on his own? Seeing that she was about to get angry, Lord Dawish Jinghe smiled flatteringly and said softly, Disciple, don't be angry. Although I didn't manage that stupid boy, I found someone to manage him. Rest assured. Found someone? That's right. Your senior brothers have nothing better to do, so I found one of them to look after your child for you. This was indeed something he would do. Back then, didn't he throw her to martial uncle Xianin for a long time? Later, because of other matters, he had no choice but to recognize her as his disciple. With a sigh, Mo Chinga said, Master, since you don't have anything to ask, I'll go back and rest first. All right, all right. He nodded hurriedly. Have a good rest. I'll have them call you if there's anything. Oh, by the way, which senior martial brother is Jinji with? I'll go get him first. This? Lord Dawish Jinghe stared at her then said cautiously, Jinji's already 40 years old now. He's no longer the child from back then, yet you still want to adopt him? Leave him some face as a man. No matter how old he is, he's still my nephew, Mo Chinga said. Besides, in terms of age, she could indeed be Jinji's mother. Thinking up to this point, she cast a somewhat suspicious glance at him. Master, tell me the truth, what did you do to Jinji? I really didn't. Lord Dawish Jinghe said boldly and put on a serious face. I'll have someone call him back later, okay? I promise you'll see him in a while. Mo Chinga stared at her master for a long time then finally nodded. All right, I hope master isn't lying. Hee, how could I? Quickly go and rest. You look tired. Mo Chinga was persuaded by his seemingly concerned tone. I understand. She turned around and walked a few steps then turned back again. By the way, Lord Dawish Jinghe was startled. Ha! Master, do you really have to be this scared? No, I'm not scared. Lord Dawish Jinghe rubbed his nose, his gaze wandering. I said I called Jinji back. What other questions do you have? I just want to ask, what kind of major event happened when the school sent the summoning talisman this time? Upon hearing this question, Lord Dawish Jinghe calmed down. About this, major event is indeed a major event, but it's not a bad thing. It's a bit complicated, so I'll tell you later. You should go and rest first. This time his expression was very firm. Mo Chenga thought about it. Although Master was unreliable, he never delayed official business. Since that was the case, she'd let him go. All right, Master, I'll believe you this time, but don't let me down. I know. Lord Dawish Jingha impatiently drove her away. You've just come back, but you're already so annoying. Go and rest. Looking at him, she really didn't believe there was no conspiracy. Mo Chenga sighed inwardly, then walked towards her Mingxin residence. After she left, Lord Dawish Jingha hurriedly called, Mingxia. Here. Mingxia hurriedly ran over. Quickly go to that stinky brat's place and get Jinji back. Mo Chenga naturally didn't know what Lord Dawish Jingha said. She walked into her small cave and found that nothing had changed. There was a pond in front of the house, a medicinal field in the back, and a row of 5 small houses. There were still only a few tables and chairs in the small living room, a tea set, and 2 books on the table which she used to read often. In the concocting room, there was the coarse concocting furnace she bought for 15 spirit stones when she first started learning pill concocting. She had never used the tool concocting room, so it was empty and had nothing inside. In the lounge, Jinji's bed was still there, but there was nothing he usually used. Finally, there was her cultivation room. It was still the same as before, but it was clean and tidy. Apparently, someone cleaned it from time to time when she wasn't here. She naturally didn't think those maids did it out of kindness. Maybe it was Master's order or Jinji's doing it himself. Thinking up to this point, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She picked up an animal skin book from the bookshelf and casually flipped through it. In this place, someone was still thinking about her. Auntie. A somewhat unfamiliar voice came from outside. Mo Chenga turned around and saw a young man in his 20s running towards her from the door of the cultivation room. He had delicate and pleasant features, and when he smiled, there were 2 small dimples on his cheeks. Auntie. He was extremely happy to see her. Mo Chenga thought he would jump up like before, but in the end he just ran towards her with quick steps. You're finally back. The Yi Jinji in front of her was already a foundation-building cultivator. He still looked young and his temperament was still gentle, but he gave off a feeling that he was a lot more mature. She stared at him for a long time and finally said, Jinji, you've grown up. Yi Jinji grabbed his hair and smiled embarrassedly. Auntie, why did you go out for so long? Of course I've grown up. By the way, why haven't I heard from you for so long? Are you in danger? Are you alright? I was worried to death, but Grandmaster always said I was worried for nothing. Mo Chenga sat down on the praying mat. She watched as he automatically sat in front of her and chattered about what happened after they parted. She felt warm inside as if she was under the warm sun in winter. Auntie, why aren't you talking? Yi Jinji finally noticed her silence after he finished asking a bunch of questions. Mo Chenga, who had been smiling the whole time, finally answered, Auntie saw that you were talking very happily, so I'll let you talk to your heart's content first. Auntie. Yi Jinji's expression fell. Why are you acting like Master? Master? Mo Chenga wrinkled her brows slightly. Yi Jinji ignored that she was actually asking him a question. He impatiently asked again, Auntie, you haven't told me how you've been in the past 22 years. She smiled and thought for a while before answering, I did encounter some things, but I also obtained some fated chances. In the end, it was more daunting than dangerous. I didn't contact you because I was trapped in a place for a long time, but it's all over now, so there's no danger. She casually explained, then asked, What's the matter with the master you mentioned? Who taught you all these years? It's Master. Yi Jinji seemed to be a bit confused about her question. Auntie, after you left, it took me several years to build my foundation. Grandmaster became impatient when he saw me building my foundation, so he sent me to Master's place. At this point, he curled his lips, obviously very dissatisfied with this Grandmaster's behavior. He then smiled and said, Fortunately, although Master looks very fierce, he's actually very good. Although Master has been very busy these years, he's always taken care of me. Mo Chenga had a bad premonition. Who's the Master you're talking about? Who else could it be? Don't I only have one Master? Yi Jinji looked puzzled. Mo Chenga slowly furrowed her brows, remaining silent. Auntie? Yi Jinji called her cautiously. It's nothing. She slowly smiled. Even if something happened, it wasn't Jinji's fault. It was that old pervert who schemed against her. This was really strange. She avoided everything because she didn't want to have anything to do with that senior martial brother, so why did that cheap Master want to scheme against her? Great. The nephew she raised as a disciple became someone else's disciple just like that. He called him master so intimately, completely unlike how he used to be. Realizing what she was thinking, Chenga was dumbfounded. She then raised the corners of her mouth in a self-mocking manner. What kind of mentality was she having now? Was she jealous? Because she hadn't come back for more than 20 years, Jinji now had someone who might be as important as her, so she felt unhappy? Or was it because that person was him? She realized her thoughts were a bit bad. Apparently, as soon as she came back, some emotions that she'd controlled well started to spread involuntarily. She couldn't help but raise her head to look around. There was obviously no trace of them anymore. Jinji, she asked slowly, how did you get through all these years? How did your master treat you? Seeing that she didn't look unhappy, Jinji finally relaxed. He thought for a moment then answered slowly, Auntie, when you sent me to Yi Clan that year, I stayed there for half a year before I came back. With Xiaohua by my side, nothing happened on the way back. After I came back, I smoothly passed the test and obtained a foundation-building pill. With Grandmaster's consent, I entered closed-door meditation to build my foundation, but I didn't succeed. Upon seeing him spreading his hands, Chenga was puzzled. Didn't I give you something to take out when you built your foundation? Auntie, are you talking about that bottle of medicinal pills? Jinji scratched his head then said embarrassedly, I was too excited the first time and forgot about it. Upon seeing his expression, Chenga shook her head helplessly. You could forget anything, but you actually forgot such an important thing. Jinji said, I've never built my foundation before, so I was too excited. At this point he couldn't help but laugh. Later, when I failed to build my foundation, I found out Auntie secretly left me a foundation-building pill. But everyone knew I failed to build my foundation, so it wasn't good for me to enter closed-door meditation again. Moreover, entering closed-door meditation again right after I failed wasn't good either, so I waited for another 3 years. This time I finally succeeded. And at least you're not completely stupid. Auntie. Upon seeing his embarrassed expression, Chenga couldn't help but laugh. Okay, continue. Jinji glanced at her embarrassedly then said, after I built my foundation, I ran into a lot of cultivation problems, so I went to ask Grandmaster. In the beginning, Grandmaster gave me detailed instructions, but later, Grandmaster got impatient after I asked too many questions. He said, Master's already in the late stage of the core formation realm, but he doesn't have a disciple to serve him. As his disciple, how can I be so idle? Then he threw me to Master. Then, how did your master treat you? Master was very good. When he mentioned the word, master, Jinji's expression was no longer as disdainful as it was 20 years ago. Instead, it was filled with reverence. Master doesn't like to talk much and he doesn't like to deal with people. People who don't know him always think he's cold and arrogant, but in fact he's not like that. When I first went to him, I didn't understand anything and was quite afraid of him. But later I felt Master was very good. He was so busy, but he taught me cultivation patiently and never became impatient. Grandmaster said he wanted me to serve Master, but Master didn't even let me serve him tea or water. Jinji talked non-stop for a long time, but Chenga didn't say a single word until the end. Auntie? Are you unhappy? After a long time, Chenga finally sighed. No, you're very good. In the end, that old guy still got his way. He probably didn't have good intentions when he suggested that in the beginning, right? Fine, I should be happy that someone is good to Jinji. As for that old guy, don't think he really won. Chapter 227. After they talked about their feelings after parting, Jinji looked at Chenga and mumbled. He wanted to say something but couldn't. Chenga was puzzled. What? Is there something you want to say? What can't you say to me? Jinji looked at her awkwardly and said carefully, Auntie, you're back, so I should also come back. But Master treats me so well. If I leave as soon as you come back, wouldn't that be bad? So that's the problem. Chenga smiled. It's good that you have the heart. Now that you're not a child and a foundation-building cultivator, there's no reason for you to live in my small cave. Besides, he's your master, so you should serve him. But Auntie, you... Jinji hesitated. I don't want you to live alone. Chenga shook her head. I'm not a child. Besides, I'm about to enter closed-door meditation to advance to the core formation realm, which will take at least 20 to 30 years. Even if you come back, I can't take care of you. You don't have to feel embarrassed. You should go back, Chenga said faintly. Since your master treats you well, You should also fulfill your filial duties as a disciple. I'm busy forming my gold core now, so I really can't take care of you. All right. Yi Jinji was in a dilemma, but in the end, he listened to her. All right, you've been here for a long time. You should go back now. Got it, Auntie? You just came back, so rest well. I'll come and see you when I have time. Emo Chenga nodded with a smile and watched him leave. Emo Chenga was the only one left in the room. Her smile disappeared and she sat in silence for a while. All kinds of feelings flashed through her heart, but in the end she just sighed. Forget it, forget it. In fact, it's better for Jinji this way and she'll have fewer worries. Lord Daoist Jinghe waited for a long time but no one came. He couldn't help but mutter, strange, why isn't she here yet? Mingxia, who was waiting on the side, asked, Grandmaster, what are you waiting for? Waiting for that unfilial dead girl. Lord Daoist Jinghe waved his hand impatiently. She's still not here? Did she really change? Martial Uncle Mo? Mingxia was puzzled. Grandmaster, why did Martial Uncle Mo come? Don't you want her to rest? If I give Jinji to that brat, he'll definitely be angry. Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was holding a cup of tea, said with a frown. According to her previous personality, she'd definitely come to throw a tantrum if she was angry, but why didn't she come today? Mingxia was speechless. Having served this Grandmaster for decades, she certainly knew what kind of personality the Grandmaster had. But to wait for his own disciple to denounce him, was this something a nascent soul Grandmaster would do? What kind of expression is that? Lord Daoist Jinghe glared at his maid. Mingxia said, Grandmaster, why do I feel like you just want to make Martial Uncle Mo angry? What good will it do her to be angry? Sigh, you don't understand. Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head and said, I've lived for almost 1,000 years. If I don't find some fun for myself, life would be boring. Besides, that girl is a cultivation maniac. I don't want to teach her to be like our stinky brat. Failure once is enough, but she still taught such a disciple. That's my biggest failure. Mingxia blinked her eyes. Why do I feel like you actually want to be a matchmaker? Lord Daoist Jinghe was speechless for a long time after Mingxia hit the nail on the head. Seeing that there was no one around, Mingxia mustered her courage and asked, Grandmaster, didn't you say in the past that the people of the Dao sect who don't engage in dual cultivation have their own benefits? Without any worries, their mental states will be more peaceful? Lord Daoist Jinghe rubbed his nose and said, Dual cultivation also has its advantages. Besides, this matter has to be looked at in detail. That stinky brat obviously has a knot in his heart, so I might as well help him. Knot in his heart? Help him? Mingxia didn't understand, but Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't plan to answer. He scratched his head and said, Enough. Go take a look at what that girl is doing. Is she really not angry at all? Angry? Emo Chenga asked herself. Of course she couldn't not be angry. This master of hers clearly wanted to scheme against her. But after thinking about it carefully, she felt it was better to entrust Jinji to someone else in her current state. Now that she was about to form her gold core, there were too many things she had to do. Jinji was already in the foundation building realm, so there wasn't much she could do for him. That being the case, why should she be angry with that unreliable master? It wouldn't benefit her and would only make other people happy for nothing. Emo Chenga collected her thoughts and rested for a few days. During this time she casually dismissed the maids who came to inquire about her. After the incident at Bishuan Court, she had never longed to advance and become stronger as much as she did now. Later, Yi Jingwen, Luo Fengxue, Han Qingyu, and even Kuang Zhu and the others all sent her summoning talismans to ask about her. Emo Chenga went to visit them one by one. Yi Jingwen's cultivation went smoothly and he was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. Although Luo Fengxue didn't make any progress in her cultivation, she became the chief steward of Sweet Dew Peak and was like a fish in water. Like her, Han Qingyu and Kuang Zhu were already in the peak stage of the foundation building realm and were waiting to form their gold cores. Zhan Bai couldn't advance, so he was in closed-door meditation. His two sworn brothers and sisters, Xiaoguzi and Xiaozue, failed to build their foundations several times and were now ordered by Kuang Zhu to enter closed-door meditation. They weren't allowed to leave until they built their foundations. By the time she finished her visits, Emo Chenga already had a better understanding of the reason why all foundation building disciples were summoned back to the school. Martial Uncle Shenin moved to Sweet Dew Peak. As his disciple, Luo Fengxue was also good at managing things, so all the affairs on Sweet Dew Peak were now handled by her. Regarding this matter, Luo Fengxue secretly leaked some information to her. As it turned out, during the school's major competition 20 years ago, when two core formation martial uncles were having a competition, they accidentally caused the mountain wall to collapse and unexpectedly discovered that there was an extremely secret magic formation hidden in the valley of the main peak. After some investigation, the school head and several core formation elders believed that this magic formation was set up at least more than 100,000 years ago, so they immediately reported this matter to the grandmasters of each peak. Shenqing School had been established for several tens of thousands of years, and it had produced countless astonishing and outstanding people. This formation was actually located deep inside the main peak of Mount Taikang and hadn't been discovered for several tens of thousands of years. This was too inconceivable. Mo Qingge pondered for a moment, then asked Luo Fengxue, more than 100,000 years ago, could it be left behind from the Middle Ages era? Luo Fengxue nodded, then shook her head. Several martial uncles have seen it. That's indeed what they think, but they're not sure. According to legend, after several million years in the distant past era, the human world was almost destroyed during the Great War between the immortals and the devils. Only a few people survived, and the immortals and devils were separated from the human world. From then on, it was known as the Middle Ages era. Mo Qingge once heard Lord Daoist Jinghe talk about this ancient legend. Lord Daoist Jinghe believed that the world came from nothing and that God had always been adjusting the rules of the human world. In the distant past era, God was also in the human world. Later they discovered that it was best for God not to interfere with the development of the human world, so God left the human world. Then, at the end of the distant past era, the great war between the immortals and the devils led to a catastrophe. This period of time was known as the death of gods. Because the etiquette in the human world collapsed, demons and devils ran amok, but God didn't care, so the human world was almost destroyed. In the end, the immortals and devils who cultivated and achieved the Tao also left the human world. Then came the Middle Ages era. There were no god, immortals, or devils, but there was abundant spiritual aura and resources like in the distant past era. As a result, cultivators and devil cultivators developed too fast, so the righteous and devil cultivators fought again. This time the world changed and the sea turned into mulberry fields. Later the human world finally stabilized. There was no more rich spiritual aura and natural treasures that could be seen everywhere. Whether it was cultivators or devil cultivators, they all struggled to survive. There was no longer any news of people ascending. Righteous and devil cultivators still fought, but they no longer had the power to destroy the world. In the end, Lord Daoist Jinghe said, God is the ruler of the world, while immortals and devils represent good and evil. Good and evil can't coexist since ancient times, so they're natural enemies. Although God doesn't care about the human world anymore, everything in the human world is in their hands. The power of immortals and devils is too great, so they separated the immortal world and the devil world and let the world be destroyed. Cultivators and devil cultivators are too powerful, so when the Middle Ages era ended, the world changed and the world no longer had abundant spiritual aura. From the moment the world was born, if the development of the human world wasn't satisfactory, it would be destroyed and rebuilt. We're all puppets in God's hands. Even if we're successful in our cultivation, we'll just be higher-level puppets. These words were indeed shocking to foundation-building cultivators. Mo Qingge thought for a long time and asked, then why do we cultivate? What if we can't achieve the great Tao in the end? Lord Daoist Jinghe said, silly girl, even high-level puppets are better than low-level puppets. Besides, the great Tao isn't necessarily hopeless. This is just master's deduction. You've seen deification cultivators. Are they happy? She remembered Zhong Muling and Yuan Bao and said hesitantly, they said, they're already equivalent to God in the human world. Correct. The world will always be destroyed and rebuilt, but what does that have to do with us? The distant past era has been millions of years, and the Middle Ages era has been hundreds of thousands of years. Can we live that long? We're not deification cultivators, so how do we know we can't achieve the great Tao? After we become deification, if we can become immortals and reach the immortal world, can we seek the next step? Can we cultivate and become God in the end? In the end, Lord Daoist Jinghe said, as long as there's hope for the great Tao, it's worth fighting for. What does the change in the world have to do with us? In the Middle Ages era, the spiritual aura was as abundant as in the distant past era. Many things were inherited from the distant past era and were extremely powerful. After discovering this magic formation, several martial uncles and I immersed ourselves in studying it for more than 10 years. In the end, we finally discovered that this magic formation was used by a certain cultivation group in the Middle Ages era to train its disciples. Luo Fengxue pulled Mo Qingge back from her thoughts. She pondered for a moment and asked, What can we get from here? Luo Fengxue said, spiritual plants. Mo Chenga was stunned. After so many years, these spiritual plants can't be used anymore, right? Luo Fengxue smiled. That's not true. In fact, this magic formation doesn't reward disciples with spiritual plants. After more than 100,000 years, those things can't be used anymore. Instead, the spiritual plants growing inside might be very ordinary at that time, but after more than 100,000 years, they're the most precious treasures. I see. Mo Chenga pondered for a moment, then asked, in the distant past era, there must have been a lot of high-level cultivators. Why did they want us, foundation-building disciples, to go? Luo Fengxue said, Chenga, don't forget that high-level cultivators back then were much more powerful than they are now. This magic formation automatically adjusts the difficulty of the disciples who enter according to their cultivation levels. Several martial uncles have tried it, but nascent soul and core formation cultivators couldn't pass many tests. Foundation-building disciples, on the other hand, managed to pass a bit more. Chapter 228. Mo Chenga thought about it and understood what Luo Fengxue meant. In the Middle Ages, spiritual aura and materials were richer than today's, so although those cultivators were in the same realm as today's cultivators, their methods were much more powerful. In particular, cultivators in the core formation realm and above could unleash the full power of magic weapons, and the materials used in those magic weapons were much better than today's. Therefore, core formation and nascent soul cultivators were much weaker than cultivators in the Middle Ages, which was why they couldn't move an inch inside this magic formation. On the other hand, foundation-building cultivators couldn't unleash the full power of magic weapons even if they used magic weapons, so the gap between them and cultivators in the Middle Ages was smaller. Since that's the case, it's enough to select the foundation-building disciples with high cultivation. Why summon all the foundation-building disciples back? Luo Fengxue said with a smile, this magic formation is very powerful. In the past dozen years, martial uncles have studied it for a long time, but they still couldn't figure out the principle behind it. Once you enter the formation, there will be many forks in the road. We just want the spiritual plants growing inside, not the reward for passing the test, so the more disciples who enter the formation, the better. Mo Chenga asked again, from what you said, entering this magic formation won't be dangerous? Then why don't you let everyone enter? Luo Fengxue shook her head. The activation of this magic formation only depends on the cultivation level of the person with the highest cultivation level. If a core formation cultivator enters, its power will greatly increase, so it's best to let a group of cultivators in the same realm enter. In fact, we also thought about letting aura refining disciples enter in the beginning, but perhaps aura refining disciples weren't considered beginners in the Middle Ages, so they couldn't even enter the entrance of the magic formation. I see. Mo Chenga murmured. A well-preserved magic formation from the Middle Ages with ancient spiritual plants growing inside was a huge opportunity for Shenqing School's development. It was no wonder those martial uncles couldn't calm down and directly summoned all the foundation-building disciples back. Luo Fengxue said, but Chenga, you still have to prepare some things. Although this magic formation doesn't hurt people, if you don't pass it, you'll be transported out. The spiritual aura needed to activate this magic formation is really too much. The martial uncles estimated that this kind of large-scale activation can only happen once every 50 years. Moreover, the reward this time is quite generous. Medicinal pills will be distributed according to the amount of spiritual plants you collect. The more tests you pass, the more spiritual plants you can collect, and the more rewards you'll get. I understand. Mo Chenga thanked him, then returned to Clear Spring Peak. Since this was the inside story, a disciple in the peak stage of the foundation-building realm like her was definitely someone the school had high hopes for. In that case, she really had to prepare a bit more. After all, she couldn't lose her master's face. With these thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian walked toward Shangqing Palace. Before he reached the entrance, he heard a voice coming from the entrance. Who are you? How dare you stop me? A domineering and arrogant woman's voice rang out. Mo Chenga was astonished. There was actually someone in Shangqing Palace who dared to make such a racket? Raising his head to look, he saw a woman in her 20s scolding the gatekeeper disciple in a domineering manner. Looking at her cultivation, she was only at the middle stage of foundation establishment. The disciple glared at the woman and said coldly, "Who are you, senior sister? This is Grandmaster Jinghe's Immortal's Cave. Without being summoned, no one is allowed to enter." Even if they weren't elite disciples, Those who were able to guard the door for their grandmaster were the cream of the crop among the ordinary disciples. It would be strange if they weren't annoyed by this woman's arrogant attitude. "Who am I?" The woman pointed at her own nose and said angrily, "I haven't been back for several decades, yet you already don't know who I am." Nevertheless, the gatekeeper disciple still refused to retreat even half a step. He stared at her coldly and said, "Senior sister, please leave. If you keep acting like this, I'll have no choice but to drive you out." "You." Upon hearing the word drive, the woman flew into a rage. But before she could get angry, the gatekeeper disciple saw Mo Chenga approaching. His smile changed and he said politely and respectfully, "Marshal Uncle Mo, you're back." Mo Chenga nodded and said, "N." She then walked inside. The gatekeeper disciple naturally wouldn't stop her, but just as Mo Chenga took a step, a shout came from behind her, "You're not allowed to enter." Mo Chenga turned her head. It was this arrogant woman. Before she could say anything, the gatekeeper disciple already shouted, "Senior sister, you can't be rude to Marshal Uncle Mo." The woman's face was completely red. She looked both angry and angry. Her gaze swept over Mo Chenga, but it was filled with hostility. "Who is she? Why can she enter?" The gatekeeper disciple said coldly, "This is Marshal Uncle Mo, Grandmaster's disciple. Of course she can enter." "What?" The woman was shocked. Her hostility towards Mo Chenga became even stronger. Mo Chenga didn't feel like saying anything. She just turned around and entered Shanxing Palace. No matter who this person was, her arrogant and domineering appearance was really annoying, so she didn't feel like paying attention to her. She bypassed the screen wall and stepped into the hall, only to see Lord Daoist Jinghe chatting and laughing with Weiyu and Qingxue. "Master," she called out. Lord Daoist Jinghe turned his head and said, "Oh." He then continued to say, "There was one time when Grandmaster saw an old woman in Shisha. She was really funny. Her face was obviously full of wrinkles, but she always held her orchid-shaped fingers and thought her beauty was unparalleled." As he spoke, he even imitated other people's orchid-shaped fingers and said angrily, "Hateful." Mo Chenga instantly had goosebumps all over her body. This master. Doesn't he feel ashamed doing this kind of thing? Weiyu and Qingxue naturally didn't think so. The two of them giggled and even urged him, "Grandmaster, what else?" Mo Chenga's face darkened. "Master." Lord Daoist Jinghe finally looked her in the eye. He said with dissatisfaction, "Master, I'm talking happily. If you have something to say, say it later." Mo Chenga glared at Weiyu and Qingxue, signaling them to leave. Although Weiyu and Qingxue were reluctant, Marshal Uncle Mo's prestige from back then was still there, so they bowed and were about to leave. "Wait." Mo Chenga stopped them. "It's noisy outside. Go take a look. If there's nothing else, dismiss them." There was a formation at the door, so the two of them didn't know what was going on outside. Upon hearing what Mo Chenga said, they hurriedly answered, "Yes." After the two maids left, Lord Daoist Jinghe felt even more bored. He snorted and said, "What? If you have something to say, say it quickly." "Master, who's that person outside?" Weiyu and Qingxue were just maids, so they didn't dare to spread their divine senses at will. However, this was Shanxing Palace on Clear Spring Peak. She wouldn't believe Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't know anything about what was going on outside. "Oh, that girl." Lord Daoist Jinghe picked up a few peanuts and tossed them around. "Don't mind her. She hasn't made any progress in dozens of years. Let her get the cold shoulder for once." Although he looked like he didn't care, Mo Chenga saw the sadness in his eyes. Thinking of that woman's behavior and what the two of them said, she had a rough idea of what was going on. If that was the case, she shouldn't care about this matter, so she didn't say much. Instead, she asked, "Master, I heard from Qingxue that they called us back this time because a magic formation was found in the valley on the main peak. At that time, all the foundation building disciples are going to go in and collect spiritual plants, right?" "Oh, Qingxue told you?" Lord Daoist Jinghe finally looked at her. He pointed at the chair in front of him and asked her to sit down. "Then what do you think?" "Of course it depends on what Master thinks." Mo Chenga picked up a book on the small table and flipped through it. "Do you want me to show off my invincible might, or do you want me to remain silent? Say it." Lord Daoist Jinghe was a bit interested in her appearance. "You're very confident. As your disciple, how can I not be confident?" What she said made Lord Daoist Jinghe very happy. "It seems you've made a lot of progress in the past 20-odd years. Tell me what happened." "Master, didn't you say I'd be fine as long as you felt my meridians and I didn't need to ask anything?" Lord Daoist Jinghe glared at her. Damn girl, don't say it if you don't want to say it. There wasn't even a message from you for more than 20 years. Fortunately, I asked for your blood essence before I left. Otherwise, I would have thought you died outside. Emo Chinga said helplessly, I really almost died outside. It's not that I didn't want to send a message back, but I was trapped for 20 years and couldn't move. What could I do? Trapped for 20 years? Lord Daoist Jinghe raised his eyebrows, looking quite interested. What happened? What were you trapped by for 20 years? Thus, Emo Chinga roughly told him what happened in the past 22 years. In the end, when she mentioned Bishuan Court inviting her to be a guest elder, she asked, Master, what I did shouldn't violate the school's rules, right? In any case, I'm just a guest elder. I don't need to manage things. Lord Daoist Jinghe listened with great interest and waved his hand. You're just a guest elder of a small cultivation group? What's the matter? You said that devil cultivator can actually cultivate dead aura? Yes, and he can also use dead aura to attack. I remember when I first met him, he was only in the late stage of the foundation building realm, but after he was surrounded by dead aura, his cultivation level soared to the core formation realm, and his cultivation level even soared again in fights of magical power. Master, there's actually such an evil technique in this world? If that's the case, isn't the cultivation level of devil cultivators much higher than cultivators of the righteous path? Lord Daoist Jinghe frowned and pondered while shaking his head. No, that person isn't an ordinary devil cultivator. In the past, I've also been to the territory of devil cultivators. Although most of the devil cultivators' cultivation techniques are strange and many of them are life-threatening, I've never heard of anyone cultivating dead aura. The person you're talking about is an anomaly, so the problem should be with his cultivation technique. Did you get the stone tablet with the cultivation technique recorded on it? Take it out and let me take a look. Emo Chinga paused for a moment, then said, I don't dare to take it out directly. Master, please wait, I'll think of a way. In fact, she threw the stone tablet into the virtual sky world so she couldn't take it out right away. Fortunately, Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't doubt her. All right. In addition, Master, can I prepare to form my gold core? Lord Daoist Jinghe said, it's fine as long as you feel it's right. When this matter is over, you can enter closed-door meditation. At that time, I'll take this opportunity to get you some medicinal pills. With your current cultivation level, I reckon you'll be able to reach the peak stage of the foundation building realm in 10 or 20 years. At that time, you'll be able to form your gold core steadily. My clear spring peak should produce another genius disciple. At this point, he stroked his beard complacently. Emo Chinga was just about to say something when she saw Weiyu coming in with a distressed expression. Weiyu shouted, Grandmaster, that woman is so unreasonable. Chapter 229. If she was really that woman, she'd certainly be unreasonable. Emo Chinga looked up and saw Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was smiling just a moment ago, saying faintly, Let her in. Grandmaster. Weiyu was dumbfounded, but she quickly reacted and said, Yes. Emo Chinga should have taken her leave, but she really wanted to watch the show, so she shamelessly ignored Lord Daoist Jinghe's gaze and stayed. He glared at her, but she didn't respond, so Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't feel like paying attention to her. Not long after Weiyu left, she saw the woman rushing in from the door. When she saw Lord Daoist Jinghe, her eyes turned red and she ran towards him with a sobbing tone. Grandmaster. She ran to Lord Daoist Jinghe, knelt down with a plop, then grabbed his clothes and looked up with tears in her eyes. Grandmaster, Emo Chinga saw that Lord Daoist Jinghe's expression was indifferent at first, but when the woman knelt and cried in front of him, his expression slowly softened. In the end, he sighed helplessly and gently pulled her up. Mingzhu, it's been so many years. Do you know your mistakes? While wiping her tears, the woman choked and said, Grandmaster, I know my mistakes. I missed you so much when I was outside and I regret it so much. It's good if you really know your mistakes. Lord Daoist Jinghe let her sit next to him and said seriously, Tell me, where did you go wrong? The woman wiped her tears and said, I shouldn't have lost my temper, I shouldn't have fought with my fellow disciples, and she bit her lip. I shouldn't have stopped others from getting close to Senior Martial Brother, and I shouldn't have had delusions. Grandmaster, I really know my mistakes. Don't let me stay outside alone again, okay? Senior Martial Brother? Emo Chinga raised her eyebrows. Fengshua shouldn't be wrong about what happened. Whether it was according to cultivation level or seniority, shouldn't she call him martial uncle? Lord Daoist Jinghe's expression softened and he said earnestly, We cultivators should know the principle of the heart moving at will and the mind maintaining tranquility. It's not that we shouldn't have affection or abandon the idea of love, but we shouldn't be obsessed and shouldn't fall into a demonic barrier. Do you understand this? The woman lowered her head, crying as she nodded. Lord Taoist Jinghe originally wanted to say more, but upon seeing Mo Chenga's current appearance, he eventually shook his head and said, "You should have come back for the disciple gathering this time, so you can't be considered leaving without permission. Go back to your Zhili house. It's still the same as when you left." When Mo Chenga saw his face that was still shedding tears, she was instantly ecstatic. However, when she raised her head, she restrained herself a little. "Grandmaster, you're still treating me so well?" Lord Taoist Jinghe reached out and stroked her head. There was nostalgia and sadness on his face. "You're the child I watched grow up. Alright, you should go rest. When things are settled, you can go back to Yungang Mountain Courtyard." The woman was startled. "Grandmaster, I still have to return?" Lord Taoist Jinghe smiled faintly, his face devoid of any extra expression. "You should go rest. You must be very tired after rushing back from such a long distance. If you have anything to say it later." The woman's expression changed. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she held back. She stood up and bowed. "Grandmaster, I'll be leaving first." Lord Taoist Jinghe nodded, then closed his eyes, looking like he was meditating. The woman had no choice but to clench her teeth and leave. When Mo Chenga saw the contemptuous and jealous expression on Lord Taoist Jinghe's face when he passed her, she picked up the cup of tea on the table, then lowered her head and sipped it expressionlessly. When the footsteps disappeared and the hall became quiet again, Lord Taoist Jinghe finally opened his eyes. His gaze was filled with sadness as he stared at the way the woman disappeared. This was the first time Mo Chenga saw this playful master of hers reveal such a sad expression. For a split second, she suddenly felt jealous of the woman who just left. Although her master never put on airs in front of her and allowed her to be impolite, he never looked at her with this kind of gaze. Such a gaze when looking at a precious child. She knew that no matter how well her master treated her, in his heart, he probably still wasn't as good as that woman. Realizing what she was thinking, Mo Chenga smiled self-deprecatingly. 2 days ago she was jealous of Jinji, but today she was jealous of her master again. What was wrong with her? Not to mention that she shouldn't be obsessed with this, but why should Jinji and her master treat her more seriously? For more than 20 years she wasn't the one who taught Jinji, and she wasn't raised by her master. "Chenga," Lord Taoist Jinghe suddenly said. Mo Chenga was stunned for a while before she finally looked up. "Master. Do you know who she is?" Mo Chenga frowned slightly. "I think she should be Senior Marshal Brother Qingyuan's daughter." "Correct." Lord Taoist Jinghe wasn't surprised that she guessed it at all. He leaned back on his dragon chair, his gaze falling on the void. "That was more than 100 years ago. At that time, I hadn't advanced to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm for long. I wanted to go further on the path to immortality, so I often went out to look for fated chances. For this reason, several of my disciples also often put aside their cultivation to run errands for me. Although Qingyuan was my disciple, his aptitude wasn't very good. Back then, I saw that his aptitude was ordinary, but he cultivated diligently, so I took pity on him and accepted him as my disciple. That child was honest and always felt that he could form his gold core because I took care of him, so he respected me the most and always did his best to do things for me. One time, when Qingyuan went out, he accidentally encountered a 10,000-year-old cheli tree. He knew I wanted cheli fruits, so he went to pick them. Unexpectedly, there was an 8th-ranked demonic beast guarding next to the cheli tree. At this point, Lord Taoist Jinghe closed his eyes. I saw his longevity lamp go out, so I went to look for him and found that he didn't even have a corpse left. Mo Chenga was stunned. An 8th-ranked demonic beast was equivalent to the early stage of the nascent soul realm. This senior martial brother was only in the core formation realm, so how could he defeat it? No wonder Master tolerated that arrogant grand disciple so much. It turned out that her father died for Master. "Master," Mo Chenga whispered, "you're telling me this because..." Lord Taoist Jinghe showed a bitter smile. "Do you think I don't know that child Mingzhu's personality? She lost her father when she was a child because of me, and I didn't teach her well. In fact, I really owed her. After I took her back, I spoiled her too much and fostered her arrogant personality. Although I knew she was in the wrong, I couldn't bear to discipline her until she attacked a fellow disciple." Mo Chenga once heard Luo Fengxue talk about this matter. Wei Jiasi was seriously injured by this person, and the reason was only because Wei Jiaxi accepted an errand to serve senior martial brother Shoujing. The child she injured was Xuannin's disciple and also my grand disciple. No matter how much I loved Mingzhu, I couldn't be too biased, so I had to punish Mingzhu heavily and ruthlessly control her. But I spoiled her rotten a long time ago, so she couldn't change no matter what. In fact, she even became worse and didn't know how to repent. I was extremely disappointed. In a fit of anger, I ordered her to go to a courtyard thousands of miles away from here and told her that she wasn't allowed to return to the mountain without a summon. Mo Chenga listened in silence for a while, then asked, "Master, do you want me to be lenient with her?" Lord Daoist Jinghe stared at her, then said with a sigh, "You're a smart person. You must have clearly understood what I meant just now. It's been 60 years since I ordered her to go to the courtyard. That child should have suffered a lot, but looking at her now, how could she show even the slightest bit of remorse? It's been 60 years. The disciples guarding the gate and my maids have all been replaced, so how could I possibly recognize her? She came back, but she didn't tell anyone to report to me and just kept pestering me." Mo Chenga carefully calculated in her heart. This nominal martial nephew of hers was probably 160 or 70 years old, right? Such behavior was indeed too willful. Although her master treated her gently just now, his attitude was distant. Moreover, her martial uncle was also present, but her master didn't let her greet him. Obviously, he didn't intend to let her come back. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga felt her jealousy was unreasonable. I understand. She'll only stay for a while. Even if she does something excessive, I'll just ignore it. Lord Daoist Jinghe felt slightly gratified. She was raised by me. Even your senior martial brother Shoujing can't compare to her. How could I not feel distressed seeing her come back like this? It's been 60 years, so if she knew she was wrong, I'd let her come back. But she missed this opportunity. Her attitude is still arrogant, her cultivation level hasn't improved in the slightest, and she even learned to deceive me. For her father's sake, I won't treat her unfairly with medicinal pills or magic weapons, but she can forget about coming back to Mount Taikang in the future. Upon seeing the cold expression on her master's usually smiling face, Mo Chenga knew he was really angry. That woman was really stupid. She pretended to be tearful in front of her master, but she didn't know how to hide her expression. How could a dignified nascent soul cultivator be easily fooled? This kind of stupidity, thinking herself smart, was more terrifying than simply not being smart. Master, don't be too sad. This matter really can't be blamed on you. She grew up with senior martial brother Shoujing, but isn't senior martial brother Shoujing doing well? Whether it's the path of cultivation or the path of life, one has to walk on their own. If they don't make progress, what else can they do? Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head. How could he not know Mo Chenga was trying to comfort him? Teaching in accordance with her aptitude. Master doesn't know how to educate a child. I always thought it was okay to spoil her a little since she was a girl, so she made mistakes again and again. Forget it, forget it. I've given her so many chances, but she didn't repent at all and even learned to play tricks. Since that's the case, I'll let her stay in the other courtyard for the rest of her life. When she changes, I'll let her come back. Although he said that, Mo Chenga knew Lord Daoist Jinghe had given up. She didn't know whether she should feel jealous or sympathetic towards that woman. Her master said so many things, hoping she could be a little more tolerant. Obviously, he still loved her very much, but the implication was that he would let her spend the rest of her life in the other courtyard and was too lazy to even remind her of her mistakes. No matter how much he loved a child, if she was unwilling to repent over and over again, his doting heart would eventually turn cold. After not seeing her for 60 years, he originally hoped she could change a little bit, but the result was still the same. How could he not be disappointed? Mo Chenga asked herself. If she were in his shoes, she probably wouldn't even want to see her anymore, let alone her master who treated her so gently. Her master usually didn't behave properly, but he was so sad because of her. It could be seen how much he loved her in the past, but she didn't know how to cherish her good fortune. This woman really wasn't pitiful at all. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.